have the stream going. All right, we are green, and then let me
probably enter the video.
All right. Everything looks good here. I'm going to set the stream to public. And if you guys just want to like check the stream as well, let me know if there's any audio issues. Go ahead.
I can't really check. I'm watching Sonic stream.
Oh. Well, hold on. There we go. Set this to public. All right. We're live.
We're live. We're alive.
We are live again, prematurely this time, because we had to talk about this. Not this. No, this is just funny. This is just funny. 15 pretty big differences between good art and bad art.
Okay.
So we got...
Oh, I like how you named this.
Okay, so before anything... Is this like a joke?
This is not a joke. Okay, so
like this. Okay,
like here's like the actual like tweet. All right,
because that's always been something that's been through my mind. Where I'm just like, is this a joke chart?
So the most annoying people in the world love to say that there is no objective difference between good art and bad art. Fuck off.
Okay.
So I made a list of 15 good art versus bad art. The master list of 15 differences, and then we have the differences
here. Is this guy
here.
a tech bro?
His Twitter handle is the old books guy.
What does that mean?
I don't.
He doesn't look that old.
Well, I think he's into old books.
How do I sound?
You sound fine.
Volume wise.
A little
loud.
A little loud. A little loud.
All right, turn down.
I sometimes think the young Napoleon Bonaparte studying at the military academy is the hardest painting of all time. He's got boring taste in art.
Yeah. Let's see here. Old Books Club. No, this is unironic. This is an unironic tweet.
Like action heroes, okay.
So, number
How
one.
do I sound like shit?
I mean, you guys sound fine. I mean, I guess ask like the stream chat for when like people get in here and start saying stuff.
Yo, Moomy, tweet it out.
Tweet it out. We don't have Twitter. Well, I guess Moomy does.
Moomy does.
I can tweet it, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to post it around.
So it's like emotional effect.
Good art and bad art.
Improves mood.
Okay.
Bad art makes you feel weird.
Oh.
I don't know what that means.
I hate when art challenges me.
Dude, you know what? I agree with this. Bro.
It's like
when I was watching Melancholia by Lars von Trier, I was like, these camera angles are giving me a headache, dude. You know,
when I got back, when I got back from seeing Come and See, all right, when I saw Come and See, and I was like, wow, I feel like I'm gonna fucking I'm depressed now. God damn. All right, that movie really sapped my energy. All right, whereas good art boosts.
I hate when it saps my energy.
Directional changes. Sets off an upward spiral versus sets off a downward spiral.
Okay,
wait a minute. These are all the same thing.
Spiral sounded so funny because it's like, it's like the falling upwards thing. It's like that's not how gravity works.
I think he's talking about it's like a Gurren Lagann kind of thing. You know, They keep throwing large objects at each other.
Then what we got? Mental effect. Clarifies the mind versus confuses the mind. These are just the same thing.
Okay, well, this man has got to be real careful right now because this chart is confusing as shit. So
yeah, this is bad art.
I don't know, buddy. This is bad art.
Fast versus slower produces momentum versus produces stagnate. What does this mean?
Produces what is in momentum?
I don't know.
Is he trying to say that it inspires you or something?
Well, it's again one of those same things, right? It's just boosts energy, saps energy. 4 of these 5 are the same thing.
Yeah,
good art is about
the spiral part is very strange to me because I don't know what that's meant to do. Is art supposed to make you go into a deep depression or get you into a insane euphoria?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's spring you, you know.
Well, here we go.
Oh yeah,
that'll
it sets you on your life track.
This next one, we have drug
Oh
metaphor.
my god.
Bulletproof
coffee
versus
What's that?
wheat. I don't know what bulletproof. Gil?
Yeah, bulletproof coffee is coffee mixed with butter.
That sounds bad for your heart.
Well, yeah. It's a hallmark of a bad keto diet, or why keto is kind of bad for you. It's exactly that. It's bulletproof. It's literally high fat, no carbs. Butter has, like all dairy, has the same kind of effect of when you add fat to coffee, the fat binds to like bitterness, right? So it becomes less bitter. So from a culinary standpoint, that's kind of all it does. Although it's kind of similar to like the olive oil like Starbucks drink.
Okay.
But you can also kind of whip it. Like it's often prepared like a kind of a whipped beverage. So you put like a mixer into it, and it kind of mixes the butter into the thing while whipping air into it. So it kind of makes it like lighter, like fluffier. But the bulletproof coffee drinker type people are either like super into keto, or they're like Joe Rogan ape mode.
Gil, I feel like I have to cut you off. This is not a coffee stream. I'm sorry.
Okay, I want to get no. The people, they think that it does like good things for your mind. They think it has like beneficial brain activation shit.
Gorilla mindset, yeah.
Gorilla mindset, yeah. That's all I want to say. They think it's like good for your mind, which there's like no proof of that besides caffeine being a stimulant. That's it.
Good art is man's divine right. Yeah, I don't.
Essential nature, structured and rhythmic versus unstructured and obsessively anti-rhythm. This man must hate jazz.
Oh yeah, probably. They probably do hate art made by black people.
This is man. Already he's going into the racism territory.
Welcome to the Weeb Crew.
Welcome to the Weeb Crew. By the way, yeah, this has nothing to do with what we're talking about today. Why we're here?
I mean, it's pretty obvious what the fuck we're talking about.
It should be obvious, yeah, what we're here to talk about.
Yeah. By the way, I tweeted this. If y'all wanting to do something.
Why is number 9 about GPS? Nobody uses GPS.
I don't know what a malevolently bad map. What does that mean?
Why GPS?
I don't know.
Did Tom Myers make this? He's the only person I know who unironically uses GPS.
No, we have not talked about the video yet.
We haven't even started.
This is an introduction with this bad chart.
Yeah, Hall of Fame, join or burn, wishes to be canonic.
He spelled wishes wrong.
Yeah, wises to destroy the... This is so embarrassing. Do we do any numbers, by the way?
This guy.
Oh my god.
This guy's a dork.
This guy's a dork.
Fucking
well, that's the thing, like, drug metaphor, bulletproof coffee, dog, calling coffee a drug is, like, the most dorky thing ever.
Yeah.
Yes, caffeine is a drug, but, like, you're fucking cringe.
Oh my god.
Weed.
148 likes, 3K views. People don't like this video.
This video? Yeah.
This video?
I would dislike it if I was signed in.
Can you link this to me?
Yeah, I can link this.
What is the ratio? I'm curious.
Yeah, I want to see the dislikes.
All right, I just dropped the link in chat.
I would
only 45.
Still text like fucking
45.
45 dislikes?
Yeah, that's
That's still not great.
Not the worst ratio.
Still, yeah. That doesn't quite capture how bad this video is.
All right, I'm just gonna say, Beatrice. All right, okay. I'm on your side, girl. All right, okay. I'm on your side. Not these guys. I'm on your side. Okay.
You fucking.
Gil.
You fucking sell out. You fucking sell. You sit on my lap and you do this to me. What the fuck?
You sold us out.
You sit on my lap.
Screw Mushoku Tensei, dog. We show about this kid be doing
Mushoku Tensei.
Yeah, bro. We made a conlang. I don't care about that.
Yeah, don't associate me with defending Mushoku Tensei. My favorite isekai is Now and Then Here and There.
Oh, God damn it.
Christ.
So yeah, we're here to talk about this video today.
Actual people be like,
well, well, we're gonna talk about it, but like it's more of like an inciting thing, right? Like it's not even like. Well, we're not really intending on like going. We're not gonna do like FD, right?
We're not gonna really
watch the whole thing.
A lot of this
point by point,
because a lot of this video says nothing.
I don't know anything.
It's definitely not like it's from her stream, the podcast or whatever, where they're just kind of talking about it, so it's not as condensed. Like the information is not as condensed. So yeah, there's a lot of like stuff that we don't necessarily really are gonna refer to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're just. This is more of like a jumping off point. Like we had that stream on Sunday, talking about like how not to critique anime. Somehow, like unfortunately or fortunately or coincidentally, like she streamed this the same day, just before we did, but we didn't see it.
No. So what happened was, you are literally just here to chill. I guess let's just go through this real quick. Leadale. Joe really likes this show.
Great show. It's an awesome show.
Give the I don't think a lot of people watch this show. Yeah, I mean, some, but not. I don't know. Yeah, this probably seems like a good show. Sounds like a cute show. Go watch Leadale. I think that if you have any takeaway from the stream,
a box standard isekai full of recycled ideas that doesn't understand and doesn't want to explore, bro. Mods. Ban that guy.
Ban this man.
Ban this man.
Get that ass banned.
You know what to do, mods.
All right, it's like where
Rocks, get the Saturn stick.
Where did I put this?
There's no isekai anime out there like Leadale.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, there's no isekai anime like Leadale.
Dude, people who say this shit don't know anything they're fucking talking about. They always say this shit with her isekai. There's nothing like it.
You can't name another isekai out there like Leadale.
Well, they try to. So we got Kuma Bear, not really similar.
No.
300-year slime thing. I wouldn't know. I didn't watch that one.
These just kind of have like female protag.
This is just not an isekai. Log Horizon.
Log Horizon? Are you kidding me?
Even within its Shosetsu era of 2010, Leadale falls short of Log Horizon in world building, discussing MMO systems, and creating engaging MMO-focused characters.
That's not what it wants to do. That is not what it wants to do.
Man,
fuck this. Fuck the Beatrice fucking video. We're talking about this review.
Leadale is literally the whole premise of Leadale is that like the NPCs and the people, it's literally about your experiences are not worthless. The whole idea of Leadale is that she spent so much time in this VR MMO that when she dies because of physical like ailments, she gets sent to this other world that's real. And what's real about that is also the NPCs are sapient, including the NPCs she made. So the whole story is about her interacting with these NPCs who see her as their mother. Like, and so like the whole point of Leadale is she just goes from place to place, and then like she just occasionally runs into like her descendants effectively.
Oh, I know what this is like. This is like it's like when you play Dwarf Fortress and you do like Fortress mode, and then you do adventure mode and you visit your fortress.
Hell yes, exactly.
Yes.
Like it's
I naruhodo.
It's literally like this idea of just like the time you spend in this particular pursuit is not meaningless, is not worthless. It meant something. The only other show that has this kind of like premise in anime is Overlord, and he just kills everybody.
Yeah.
Like Leadale, there's no other inferior product. I'm gonna mods. You know what to do.
Get this ass banned.
But let's
only one on there that I would say is even kinda close is like Slime 300 Nen, but like that's just in vibe. That's totally just in vibe. That's like
just
not
a
the
vibe
narrative.
mood. Yeah. But
they're both kind of slow life-ish isekai. Like Slime 300 Nen being much more of a slow life isekai.
We can give this show the Weeb Crew bump. It's got like almost like 35,000. We can easily double that. Come on, guys, let's go.
I want this show to be at 60,000 by the end of the
night. We're gonna get banned from AniList for brigading by telling people to watch the show.
If anybody,
our massive audience,
if anybody out there has an isekai if anybody out there has isekai recommendations where the protagonist gets to see the fruit of the characters they created labor in a real sapient sense, send it to me, because I'm all on that shit. I'm all on that shit. And it's a very rare premise. It's extremely
because the closest
rare.
things are like Overlord or like Mausama Retry, but they're not the same.
Yeah, it's like that. That's why I mentioned it to Ghost and Mumi, but like that's why I'm still reading a manga, an isekai manga called Newgate, which essentially the premise of Newgate is that like they get trapped in a death game, SAO style, and then the protagonist is able to defeat the death game, and then for his reward, he gets sent to another world. The other world is literally just the setting of the death game, but it's real now, and it's 500 years into the future. Part of the premise.
Wow.
Yeah, and so a lot of the NPCs that he created as part of his team, you know, like let's say the Diablo 2 mercenary. It would be like if you had the Diablo 2 mercenary and then you showed up like 500 years into like the Diablo universe, and you find out that like your you find out that what's the mercenary's name? You know,
Azrael.
Yeah, you find out like Azrael's like had like a whole lineage. You know, like he's got like great grandchildren now.
Shit, yeah,
and you're just like, wow.
He's a village chief.
You know,
it's a good thing I gave you that infinity rune word, hey, buddy.
I wish we had talked about this show prior, because this guy was actually at Otakon, and I saw him talk about, and he actually talked about Leadale quite a bit. And I just didn't really register any of it because I wasn't really familiar with the show.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, that sucks.
Damn it, dude.
Damn it. God damn it. What a missed opportunity.
I'd be like, I know that. Takeyuki-san. Nande?
Girls just bust out Japanese.
Just completely. That would have, because they did have like people like ask questions from the audience. I think it would have been really funny if someone just stood up and asked the question fluently in Japanese.
That'd be interesting. I mean,
it would be interesting. Yeah.
I mean, what his reactions would be like? Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Guess you speak Japanese. All right.
Yeah.
Is this white guy with like native level?
Anyway, we should probably now
talk about this video.
Are we getting into the video now?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. So when Mumi, you were going through it, you have like an itinerary set up for us with what we're going to talk about. So what are we talking about?
So I didn't like I said, we don't want to really go through it, especially because like we don't want to like
20 minutes in.
It's fine.
We've been going for 20 minutes.
Oh, about 17.
Jesus. But yeah, we don't want to like go through like every fucking single point made.
Okay.
We'd be here all night again.
Well, that'd be the FD signifier stream again, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't want to like run to an issue where it's like, you know, hey, y'all just played my whole stream or whatever on video.
Yeah.
It's better to say sorry kind of thing. So yeah, we'll just kind of go through. If we want like context, we can play like a clip. I've got time stamps. But we're gonna use it more as like a jumping off point to talk about some like general criticisms.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
They're saying a lot of stuff that it's not like just them, right? It's a lot of stuff that like you see a lot of people kind of saying about the show. You know, it's boring.
It's boring. You know, Rudy is a bad person. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not looking for his mom anymore.
Is overrated.
Yeah. So like, I guess the first thing, like, so the thing about like, she kind of contextualizes it. Like, she didn't really like Rudius as a character to begin with. She kind of got into it when they go to the Demon Continent.
Is he supposed to be likable?
That's very debatable.
So she's saying like she's not invested in Rudy as a character, not so much like likable, like, oh, I think he's a cool guy or something, but like, you know, she just doesn't care about where his like character progression is going to go, and then she only kind of started liking the show when they go to the Demon Continent. It became kind of more of like a serial kind of episodic adventure kind of series.
Okay.
Which is kind of a weird kind of place to be, right? Because like the show is very character centric. Like it is very much around Rudy. So it's like if you don't like the main character and you're not invested in like his growth as a person, you're already like on the wrong foot. I think.
Yeah, I would kind of say like you're already kind of like setting yourself up for failure with regards to entertainment. I mean, the show is literally about him.
Yeah.
Like, it's about him.
Yeah, so it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
The first kind of major criticism we could talk about, which is kind of a major talking point people talk about.
Yeah, you're gonna have to like explain this whole stream to me. I never watched it.
Yeah.
Also, to be clear, like I don't watch Mushoku Tensei.
You said you watched the first season?
Past the first season.
So I mean, I literally just watched the first 4 episodes.
Bro, the Sakuga, dude. The Sakuga's so good. Sakuga's so good.
They animated every blade of grass.
Well, see, it works because like the people who watched Mushoku Tensei on the right and the people who haven't are on the left.
There we go.
Oh
my god, it's like Crossfire.
Wow, okay.
It's like poetry.
Yeah,
it rhymes.
Yeah, you know, I have not.
But
seen
the
Mushoku Tensei.
The first sort of like major criticism of the show has kind of been focused on Mushoku Tensei as a redemption story.
Okay.
They say the complaints are very much geared toward like this is a redemption story, but it's spending a lot of time with Rudy being kind of this piece of shit, and it makes him very hard. It makes it very hard to like be invested in his growth because like defenders say it's slow growth, but the people who don't like it are like it's too slow. You're spending too much time with Rudy being a bad person for me to engage with and be invested in him changing as a person. And he's not like when it does seem like he's going to make progress toward being a better person. He does something like we'll get into a little bit more later, buy a slave, and suddenly you just fucking hate him again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I guess we'll talk about that in like a very broad sense first, kind of addressing like what kind of story this is.
How slow is too slow?
It is a long story. Like what are we like 9 volumes out of 26 in right now?
Look, Aragorn doesn't redeem himself, i.e., doesn't become the illegitimate king of Gondor until the 3rd book. That's like a few hundred pages. You know? How slow is too slow?
How slow is too slow?
I see this homeless man riding up from the Dunedain, and I'm just like, bro, I need redemption now.
I need the dopamine rush. All right.
Well, I think like the thing is about this is like people are very much too focused on like the semantics of like redemption. Like, not to say that it isn't a redemption story, but I think it would be better to kind of contextualize it as like it's a rehabilitation story.
Okay.
Like he's being redeemed in the sense of like he is being able to live a second life and kind of, you know, redo all like the pitfalls he might have fell into in his previous life. And he's doing this in another world in which the world is kind of, you know, demonstrably worse than the modern world. Like there's a general kind of lack of like concern for like people's autonomy or even like lives in general.
Oh shit, Smuggler joined.
Oh my god.
Smuggler. Hi.
What's cracking?
We're streaming right now.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh whoops.
Oh yeah?
I just saw everybody. Oh no. Oh no.
Oh
this
no.
is a private channel. I just saw everybody singing.
Oh no, it's fine. It's fine. Now get the fuck out.
I just saw it. Okay, yeah.
Bye, Smuggler.
Oh my god.
I really was hoping he would be like, yeah, what do you think about the Steelers? I think they're going to clinch the NFL East.
What the fuck?
What did you say? What did I have? I had this up earlier.
Oh, okay. Plays in the Bronx. I think the idea of calling it a redemption story inherently kind of misunderstands what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, like rehabilitation. I think that's better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the story, and I think that's kind of something where like people get tripped up on, is the story is never redeeming him. in the sense of like the story is never saying, "Oh, Rudius, you did good deed. Now you're a good person." Like,
Right.
never says that, right? Like that's not the point. The point is for him to overcome his own hurdles and progress as a person, but like for himself, right? Which inherently does not mean he's going to become a good person. That's not really what like rehabilitation for someone means. I mean, if you're like in a dark place, like Rudius was for basically most of his life, and you get a second chance, you're going to be trying to become a person that you want to be, right? Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to become a good person.
Do people make a distinction between a good person and a likable person? Because those are very different things.
Those are very different.
I've not really like seen
like the
that.
protagonist of the one Isekai, Eminence in Shadow, is a very likable person.
Yeah.
But he's a very bad human being. Like
he sucks, yeah.
He literally sees the entire world as like a theatrical play upon which he can fulfill his chuny fantasies. But he's a very fun person to like kind of watch.
What about Tanya the Evil? Would that be another example?
Yeah. Tanya. Yeah, Saga of the Tanya.
Tanya's a piece of shit.
Tanya is interesting because like Tanya is. I wouldn't say Tanya's likable, but Tanya is charismatic. Like very charismatic.
Yes, very charismatic.
Which again is
affable.
different from a good person.
Yeah.
Like I feel like a lot of these characters are not good people, and that's fine. But we shouldn't assume that just because they have other qualities. We tend to associate qualities like being charismatic or being likable as the same thing as being good. But I don't think those are necessarily things that are commensurate. Especially with you're dealing with narratives that ostensibly can grapple with very difficult questions.
I think it is very much like inferred that they don't like Rudy because you're supposed to be invested in him, and like he's not likable because he's kind of a piece of shit person. But it's not like that kind of lovable piece of shit for them. It's just like he's kind of skeevy and gross, and they don't really want to engage with him on that level. They don't want to invest in his like second chance.
I think it's interesting because if we talk about like likability, Rudius is a very interesting character because he, as the second life, right? Not in his first life, definitely, but in his second life, he should be likable, right? He's intelligent. He has good manners. You know, he's considerate. He's attractive. You know, like he's a attractive young man kind of vibe, right? He's physically fit and he's a genius at magic, right? But a lot of people don't like him.
Yeah,
that's kind of a key point in Mushoku Tensei is that a lot of people do not like him. I mean, even his own dad was like, this guy's kind of fucking weird. I mean, Paul's also an asshole, but like,
I think Paul is an interesting character from what I know of the first season. I think Paul's an interesting character because Paul is the sort of mirror to Rudy's character because he has a lot of very similar qualities. He's strong, handsome, has a very specific kind of like combat-oriented lineage. He's somebody with a very, very specific kind of characteristic that you see as part of the sort of the brave archetype, the
comes from a noble family.
Yeah, but in the light novels, he's also a rapist.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like, he's not a good person.
No.
I mean, he is in the TV show too, but
yeah. They don't hide it.
And I think in like onto this discussion about like rehabilitation movie, like I think the thing is that like Paul can never ever like redeem himself in that like he undoes the misery or the wrongness that he has committed. But the whole point of his character is to, in some particular way, take responsibility for the damage he's done. Whether it is sufficient is up for debate, but that seems to be the sort of mirror that happens. It's really hard to discuss this when my My frame of reference for isekai is like Leadale.
Leadale, guys, have you heard of Leadale?
You heard of Leadale?
Have you heard of,
Yeah,
you
Leadale.
check this out.
Leadale's awesome.
Leadale's awesome. All right, check out
People
Leadale.
that aren't
like
aware of
it.
who we are
Good
just
show.
gonna be like, why the fuck they keep bringing up this random fucking shit?
Yo, Leadale's awesome. Leadale's hype.
Defend Mushoku Tensei, goddammit. But yeah, no, like there is a very much a dual, like a dichotomy between Rudy and Paul. Like they have a lot of like kind of similar traits where like it does make sense that Rudy would be born to Paul. Like he has things where it's like they kind of seem like they would be father and son, but in a way, I think Paul is more kind of like symptomatic of like the world in general. Like the fact that Paul is kind of accepted and just kind of seen as like he's basically like the marshal of the town or whatever. He's just like a guardian or for the the whole village.
Okay.
And so he's got a pretty decent esteem within like that little town, little village, whatever the fuck they live in.
He's also from a noble family, which is important to know as like in terms of like social clout.
Yes.
Because he definitely does not, underuse it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I think they're both very interesting mirrors because they have similar traits, which is primarily their sexual deviancy.
Yeah.
And they mirror each other in that way, and they both kind of hate each other for that. Because they see each other in the reflection, right?
I don't know if they hate each other. It's like they hate that reflection of themselves.
That part. Yeah, they hate that part that they could see in each
well,
other.
Rudy and Paul have a very asymmetric relationship as well because, Paul obviously sees Rudy as his son, and there's a kind of a disconnect there because Rudy doesn't really act like his son, and that's partially because Rudy isn't his son. Rudy is a grown-ass man in a little boy's body. Yeah, and Rudy does not see Paul as his father, really. He cares about his family.
He does see them as. I think he does see them as like family. I don't know if it's explicitly said, but he does care about them, and I think he does see them as like a family.
As family, but they don't have a father-son relationship in his mind.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, because I mean, it's very, very clear in the very beginning of Mushoku Tensei is that Rudy is like, I'm older than this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like I'm literally older than this guy.
Yeah.
Right. So it was very hard for him to kind of probably feel like a son to this man who's literally younger than him. But yeah, I do think he cares about them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's interesting because Paul is kind of important there because Paul is very similar to Rudy in his like past life, except Paul has everything kind of given to him, like you were kind of pointing out. Like he's from a royal family. He's like he does have esteem. He's married.
Yeah.
He's able to get away with all these things that Rudy would have liked.
He's a successful party, like a venture party.
Yes. So like it kind of establishes, I guess, like the baseline in a way of like, this is kind of where the world is at, and Rudy is kind of above Paul. Like they are kind of similar, but Rudy has never done these things that Paul has. He's still kind of, he's redeemable in a way, where Paul kind of he's already done things that makes it difficult if not impossible to actually be redeemed in what he's done. He just had to take responsibility for it. And it's important to like highlight that the world itself is very like hostile. Like it's not just like a sexual thing. Like it's also
it's a very oppressive world.
Right. Like you see it with how Eris kind of reacts to like that dude getting decapitated in the first season. Like it's just so nonchalant where like Rudy, who's like a 40-something-year-old man at this point, is like traumatized.
Yeah.
Like it shows you the level of disconnect and like how this world, like the denizens of this world kind of see these things and how Rudy as like a citizen of modern society would see it.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back into like and there's an element of like Japanese soft power into this, but like it goes into like the idea of like the modern world is so peaceful, which obviously that's kind of like a hot button issue in Japanese like.
But that's not like a very prominent aspect of Mushoku Tensei. Rudy kind of is much more. He's not a soft power character, I would say. He's not. He gels much more with the world rather than trying to like correct it. Like
Because ultimately, he never felt at home in the other world either. Right. So he was never like, a good Japanese citizen, like in that sense, right? He was never a Sakaijin, right?
Yeah.
I think he has like
he's a classical hikikomori because he literally pulled out from society.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole point.
I think he does influence the world with like modernity a bit, like in how he kind of interacts with like Sylphie and like Rudrid.
There's like the figures. That's kind of like a thing.
Yeah, that too. But like him, like how he's just able to like immediately accept like these people who are different.
Mm-hmm.
That is very much something in the like from the modern world, right?
Right.
Like, you would have some people that might be able to do that in that kind of setting. But this is still very much like where people are very kind of disconnected from each other, living in like their whole lives in like a small village. So seeing someone different, they do have that, bigotry and whereas Rudy from the modern world is used to seeing people who are different, even if he wasn't around them all the time because he's Japanese, but
and was like inside most of the time.
Yeah, it's still very much like a modern thing, where,
right?
Access to the internet,
yeah. But that it goes back to like the rehabilitation thing, right? Because the world is very kind of fucked up and like worse than where Rudy is, and so it kind of allows for Rudy to kind of interact with and kind of feel out himself in this world that's not going to judge him in the same way that modern society did. And as far as like,
do you want me to put some music on, by the way? Because I should explain something, by the way, for everyone watching this stream, is that, we're talking about this video. It's not like we're going to play the video or like that much, and I just have this still image on screen right now, and I should point out, this video is also just like still images. As you can literally see this screenshot thing right here. This video is just, there's no video component. It's just like still images. Very low quality still. Like, what the fuck?
Man, you can't get hit by the copyright.
Oh my god! Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Oh my god.
That's true. That's true.
And that's why
you got to put the static filter on.
That's why I had that's why I have like this filter on. Yeah, I can also put the static on. See, there we go. Look, voila, perfect. All right. But yeah, let me get some music on as well, because we're just talking. Maybe maybe should I put on Subway Surfers, something like that.
Keep have the playlist, right?
Yeah. I'll pull up the playlist.
Rehabilitate. So he's able to like, gosh, we went off track, and it's like,
yeah, we did.
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah. So he's able to kind of like, it ties back into like the redemption thing, right? Because I do think there's an element. I don't think it's the focus. Like, it's definitely not like he's supposed to, take his bad deeds and just become a good person. And it's like this heroic arc of like him being a piece of shit to like Jesus Christ, right? But I think like it's not completely incidental that you kind of see him in school. He's kind of like a normal kid. He has like that kind of good in him of like trying to stand up for others, and it's immediately like the tallest nail gets hammered down kind of thing, where he stands up for somebody and he's immediately just traumatized to the point where he can't leave his house anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of results, him that little seed of like trauma that he never really could address in his previous life, and like no one really helped him to kind of work through, results in him degrading in his room to the point that you see him where when he dies, like he was skipping his parents' funeral to jerk off to his cousin. Like that was very much, I think, supposed to be like a representation of how much he kind of degraded from where he was. And this is supposed to be him working on himself as a person and like how he interacts in the world. More like in the sense of, he's able to go outside. He's able to take care of his body. These little things, right? Just personal health care kind of shit that are going to help him mentally. Even if it's like incidental, like, cause you look at, the second season, like we were kind of, Sai was trying to catch up
I watched the first 4 episodes today. I was waiting for it to just end, and then I would watch it. Partially because in one of the episodes there was just some really like egregious and lame censorship of nothing. Of nothing, basically. It was just like Rudy sitting like naked on a bed.
I'm really not sure why they did
with his legs crossed.
That way.
It's like what? Yeah, and like half the screen is like blacked out. It's like why did you
do half the screen in a diagonal? Like
I don't.
But yeah, we saw. Where was I going with that? We saw in those episodes. He in the kind of beginning of season 2, he's in this one location and he's just trying to do good things.
Yes. Quagmire arc.
Yeah, the Quagmire to build a reputation, and he is very much gamifying it, right? Like you do get to see like the inner thoughts of Rudy. And he is thinking like, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to do these good things. And then like people will find me kind of, that whole thing. I don't think that diminishes necessarily what he's doing because we're not always privy to like how people are kind of thinking when they do good things. That doesn't necessarily diminish the good that they do unless they're just doing it for like evil reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's naive to think that like, there's no like transactional type of logic when you do something good for someone, like
right,
even if the transactional like thing is that you want them to feel good because that makes you feel good, like that's still kind of a transactional thing.
Mm-hmm.
So like and we have shown, interestingly, my people don't talk about Rudy as a character, is that Rudy is someone who actually does stand up for people and does try to help people, even in his previous life, which doesn't make him a good person.
No,
but it means that it shows that he had an inclination to do that anyways, right? I mean,
it shows there's good in him.
You have the incident in school, which is what led to his main trauma, which led to him being a hikikomori. But then you also have when he died, like he literally pushed people out of the way.
Yeah.
And got hit by
truck. Yeah.
Like
I think him being in that headspace
literally got killed because he was trying to help people.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is like. This is kind of almost like a tangent a little bit, but what's the thing about that is like it shows like even though he had degraded, there was still hope for him, right? Like he still went out of his way and like against his own, kind of safety to help somebody else. But like you see, like in this season, like he helps that little girl who scraped her knee, like. Mm-hmm. There's no way he was like actively thinking like, oh yeah, this is going to give me points or whatever. Like this is just something he's already kind of put himself in that mindset.
He just helped her,
Yeah, it just kind of like becomes habit. It's like a habitual thing. So it's kind of like you just kind of see how him doing these little things to improve his life, and then even if he's like initially kind of game logicking, doing good things, like it's still having a positive influence on the people around him and even himself, where he like will help people just because he's used to doing that.
Yeah.
I think there is that element of redemption. I just don't think it's the focus of the narrative like people are kind of focusing on. Like I do think the rehabilitation thing is a better way to kind of frame the story.
Mm-hmm.
Another kind of criticism is that it's, and this is not like.
Are these general? Wait, is this a general criticism or Beatrice?
These are general. Like we're talking about it generally, but these are. Okay. I am going through point by point, kind of like where they were looking at.
Okay.
In the stream, because like again, these weren't like exclusively like, these are in the video, and that is the inciting thing. But these aren't exclusively criticisms that they've had. I don't want to make it seem like we're not responding to them, because we are, but like it's just kind of more of like an easy kind of shorthand to be able to like address criticisms.
Because it would be, I feel like we're gonna run it because this is like off the cuff. It's not a structured video. We are gonna run into problems if we just go through it. Also, like I said, this video is just still images. It wouldn't be very visually interesting. I feel, even though I'm not really showing much on screen right now, and I'm sorry. I couldn't find any Subway Surfers on YouTube.
Pull up that Mr. Beast
Ooh,
video.
we're gonna watch another Cinderella story.
Yeah, just
Jamie,
pull that up.
Video. Yo, that movie is free with ads, bro.
It is free with
Bro.
ads, guys.
And
come-
you have the ad block on. That means
That's
there's
a good-
no
let's
ads.
Go, all right. You
That's
know,
a good
are there any another Cinderella story fans in chat? Come on, let's get some love for that movie. All right.
Yes.
Another Cinderella story fan.
Yeah, is this a sequel? Because I thought there was like a Selena Gomez. Maybe it's like a meta thing that's going on. I don't know. I think I may have seen this movie at one point.
Play video games while talking, you coward.
Yeah, Jamie, pull up Rocket League.
I mean,
Jay, pull up the game where they buy the slaves, Jamie.
I could literally just put on the paperclip game.
Paperclip game. Oh my god.
But yeah, another general criticism, which is not, exclusive to Mushoku Tensei, is that it's a power fantasy.
Yeah, there's
they
nothing
very
wrong with
much-
Power
that.
fantasy. What's wrong with power fantasy?
Well, first off, they're to contextualize
Case
it,
closed.
they are
Conan?
they are very dismissive of it, right?
That's
Like they're
right,
saying,
he
well,
goes-
this is kind of a power. This is a power fantasy. But they
What's wrong
do
with
get
the
into a
power
little.
fantasy? There's nothing wrong with the power fantasy.
There's not really. I mean,
You're gonna fall
I
into
get
this
the criticism.
Malformed Calvinistic understanding of human development? No way, dude.
Oh,
I
yeah,
get
screw
like
that.
you don't like it. Like it's not empowering you. Like it's not toward your sensibilities and stuff. Like I totally
sure,
get that.
but there's nothing
Um,
wrong with that.
No, like it's empowering. Like that's the thing. It's very much empowering to somebody.
Uh-huh.
Their point, like their greater point, I would say, I guess, is that it's problematic because it's empowering Rudy doing these things. And it's not interesting because it is empowering someone to do terrible things. But then it's also kind of conversely boring in how it's being a power fantasy. They kind of touch on like this arc about him trying to solve his erectile dysfunction. And they're like, why would you make a power fantasy and then have it focus on fixing erectile dysfunction?
Starting to sound like it's not a power fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, that's kind of the thing I
Starting to
talked
sound
about
like
this
somebody
before.
doesn't know how mental health issues are depicted in media.
I kind of
No, you're supposed to be on
like
you're supposed to be on Beatrice's side. What?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
This show sucks, bro. When is what season is the dick problem season?
This is right now,
two.
season 2.
Season 2,
Dos.
Core 3,
Me.
Season 3.
Season 2, part 1, the final chapter.
Oh God.
Wait, are they
fucking-
titled like that?
No, that's
final
like a
chapter part 1.
yeah.
End of series part 2.
God, I love Attack on Titan's
like the-
nomenclature. It's so
like
funny.
the title-
So bad.
That's like the title of like when you make a video and you have to save the file and you're just like
Oh,
season 2 part 1 analysis
Mm.
final
Part
2.
3. V2.
Yeah, V2 final 1080p.
Let me see if I could find it's because that's literally Attack on Titan the final season followed by Attack on Titan the final season part 2 followed by
Sequel?
Then we have Attack on Titan the final season Kanketsuhen Kohen, the second half of the last part of the final season of Attack on Titan.
So funny. It's so fucking funny.
It's literally Attack on Titan final season part 3 final arc part 2.
It's literally the only thing I care about Attack on Titan.
Oh,
it's
it's
just
so-
the naming.
I
It's
love
the naming
that.
of the seasons.
Oh, it's so
That's
good.
the only thing I care about.
Yeah, let's make some more paper clips.
But yeah, power fantasy. Bad.
Well, I talked about
what's wrong with the power fantasy?
I talked about this in my Death March video,
mhm.
but what I wanted, like what I was talking about was like when people talk about like power fantasy, it's often this kind of thing of like, well, like, oh, they have like, you know, they're really strong, which means they can gain these things, right? Which in some isekai does mean they gain like a lot of girls or whatever, right?
Sure.
That kind of thing, like social or like literal, like capital, right? Like
Right, yeah.
you get money. But the thing about like a lot of isekai, especially Tensei isekai, is a lot of the fantasy element, like a lot of the power fantasy, like he's just like me for real, is the ability to like be reincarnated into another world and then have the opportunities that you didn't have in the previous one. And like Mushoku Tensei is like a very like straightforward version of that, right? It's very straightforward.
There's a funny comment in Make You Harem in which the author has said in like one of those like notes at the end of like a manga issue where they're like yeah, it's always very relaxing to fulfill the desire of owning a home. That was his idea of power.
Oh my god,
that's so fucking real. That's so goddamn real.
That is I feel like these isekai might be a little bit social aware.
Well, that's kind of the thing, right? I mean, like Rudius, like all people, don't start as a bad person, right? I mean, he didn't like as a like Japanese person was like inherently bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
The things that made him kind of a bad person in like as a Japanese man was far down the road of like his like hikikomori trauma, right? And like, how was he supposed to get out of it? Right? He had no systems in place.
Yeah, well, it's a
the beginning of Mushoku Tensei. The Mushoku Tensei like beginning, like the intro of the story, is he's literally stripped of the one system he had in place, which was a home.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like how was he supposed to get out of that situation?
Right. Yeah. It's like a kind of what we talk about with like Zom 100, where it's like the two ways out are the world fucking ends, or you go to another world. God, that's my idea of power fantasy. Owning a home. Realistic power fantasy in 2023. Oh, God.
I've been reading a lot of webtoons recently that are literally boiled down to... how can I describe it? Somebody is bullied. They get a superpower. And the superpower allows them to get back at their bully. Mm-hmm. That usually resolves itself within like 5 chapters. And then the rest of the story is them fighting waves of increasingly strong bullies, up to and including a secret Illuminati-style cabal conspiracy of bully organizations who can only resolve any kind of issue by fighting. So they just fight nonstop. And it's exhausting reading these things, man. It's like, bro, you're always on edge in these stories where there's constant like Neketsu style character growth necessitated.
Mm-hmm.
Like it will literally be like, the first, chapter 500, I'm going to go buy a chocolate bar. He buys a chocolate bar and then the chocolate bar here drops on some guy's shoe. And then the guy's just like, oh, you gonna buy me new shoes? And then he's like, oh, I don't have enough money to buy new shoes. And the guy takes a swing and he beats him up. And then his boss comes in. And then they keep fighting. And then it's 30 chapters of fighting. And I'm just like, this is too much fighting. I don't know where I was going with this. I really just wanted to complain about this kind of webtoon.
That's like a Bleach arc.
Yeah, it's too much fighting, man.
Let me see. Is there a streamer mode for Steam that I can enable? I have a game I can put on. I just don't know how to, because I don't want to like
show your recommended.
Yes, I guess this question, and this is something that I've always kind of had like going through my mind, right? Which is that like, what is wrong with a power fantasy?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Well, it's
we believe that fiction.
Well, because it's like it's one of those things where it's like well, who is it empowering and why is a good question to ask during these sorts of things.
Yeah.
Like you literally pointed out, owning a home. What a power fantasy. That's really fucked up.
The questions of like who is it empowering is. So this is like the only reason why I agreed to come onto the stream, despite knowing absolutely fuck all about Mushoku Tensei, right? Mm-hmm. And that is that
humble king over here.
Yeah, I know probably more than the average YouTuber about reading strategies in narratology. I'm gonna go on a limb and say I may have read more about how to read text than the average YouTuber.
Okay.
I might be wrong.
You
have a source for that?
Humble king.
Very humble. But one of the core elements
Welcome back, Gil.
One of the core questions about like how we read text, how we've read text, is the question of where does the author versus where does a reader exist? And ultimately, because one of the things is that where you believe a reader exists in the process of the text in terms of its meaning making, and where the author exists in the text, ultimately kind of crafts how your narrative occurs. And one of the big questions that we kind of have to figure out is, how do you like navigate or negotiate some of these questions? Because it kind of boils back to like these sort of core questions of media about who's watching, in what context are they watching, and whether those contexts, who these people are they commensurate or are they reflective of any particular thing with regards to an author or a platform or a space or any of these kinds of stuff. This is really important because when people say something like, did the author intend for something to happen? A lot of people will kind of just say, well, it doesn't really matter because authors inform how a particular narrative occurs, but its meaning is going to be negotiated at the level of platforms as well as its readers. Because the alternative is that you essentially just negate queer readings in what are hegemonic stories.
Right.
You negate counter-hegemonic audiences because most texts are going to be hegemonic. That's just kind of the nature of it. This all sounds like a lot of like word salad, I feel like, to a lot of people. Anybody who's listening to this might think of it as word salad. But the easiest way to think about it is that, like, what does a video game give meaning? How does a video game give meaning? You know? Like, video games are really, really good at problematizing. This is why I feel like a lot of people who really want to understand, like, how to grapple with questions of narrative and narrative, like, interpretations, the hermeneutics of all this kind of stuff, they really should be reading, like, what, like, video game scholars have said about how to read something. Because this has been a problem they've had to deal with for a very, very long time. If, like, for instance, you know, like Gil and I play Age of Empires 2 with, like, cheat mods because it's funny and hilarious. But that's not something that the creators, i.e. Mr. Microsoft, wants for it to happen in any meaningful capacity. In any capacity upon which meaning is generated. But
it's funny that you bring this up.
Questions of how meaning occurs.
Given what I just put on stream. We are now playing Civilization 5 while talking about this.
And so, like, this is incredibly important because this is something that gets talked about by people like Ian Bogost. He talks about the idea of simulation fever. We tend to think of media as a mirror. It reflects something about us. It looks back at us. You know, it reflects something about us. This is a sort of argument that's been presented by Francesco Cassetti, the idea of media as glass. We tend to think of media as glass, like planes of glass. It lets us peer into something. It lets something reflect back at us. That's how we generally think of it. But Bogos argues that we should probably think of media like simulations. What is it simulating? And the element about that is really important because what something simulates is not always going to be commensurate with what an audience comes to believe about its simulation. So one example is there's a podcast I listen to now and then called Season of the Bitch.
Oh yeah, you've talked about this.
And one of the episodes they were talking about Halloween, the original Halloween, right, by Carpenter. And one of the things that they mentioned is that, like, despite not being ostensibly an intended queer film, it is a very queer film because it captures and enacts a lot of elements that sort of imbibe and reflect the queer experience. You know, the sense of like living in deep, mundane spaces that are doubly oppression, you know, that you're always on siege, you're always on edge. Like that kind of particular kind of thing. You know, it's very interesting that it happens in suburbia and then you are in some ways singled out in a particular way. But there's nothing in it that on Carpenter's end, nothing in it in terms of its text that enshrines it as such. And yet the experience defines it in that particular way, should somebody say, hey, this actually feels very queer. And it's because the simulation has engendered a particular kind of experience that sort of closes what Stuart Hall would call like the encoding decoding circulative gap. That sort of moment where things sort of cycle together to create a particular kind of meaning. So the question when I say, well, who cares about power fantasies, is that like power fantasies are not these profane things that we can like look at and point and say that's a power fantasy, and simply by the nature of it being as a power fantasy, it is bad. It is what element of fantasy, what power fantasy does it reflect within a specific audiences? Because like audiences can come with very different conclusions on what that power fantasy is about, and ultimately that more so refracts back on the context in which they're engaging with a particular kind of media.
I think that's interesting because there was a video. Just shout out to this video. They don't need the Weeb Crew bump, but I saw a video here that got recommended to me recently by Ricky Hirsch. I think that's how it's pronounced. Queer horror, understanding gender as body horror, and they're talking about like manga, like Boku Mari and Welcome Back Alice. And they talk a bit about like the readings of like Dracula being homosexual, and the reading like Frankenstein being about like two men trying to conceive life kind of thing, and like these things very much are it's very simply like death of the author, right? Like Bram Stoker like very much had like some from what I understand, like it was speculated that he was homosexual, or he was outwardly homosexual. I can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, they might have just talked about like that kind of reading. So it was interesting that you brought that up about like the podcast.
Season of the Bitch. Hell yeah. We're 17 socialist witches, and we talk about horror.
17
socialist
Oh my
witches.
god.
No, I think they have a modest cast of like 12 or something.
Okay. Well, that's still a lot of people.
Modest cast of 12.
A modestly sized coven, if you will.
God.
But in the context of like Mushoku Tensei, I think it's kind of important for it to be a power fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of isekai are almost like inherently escapist, right? Like at the end of the day, it's literally them leaving one world into another, and kind of be hard to like escape that. The power fantasy part for Rudy in particular in Mushoku Tensei is what enabling him to be able to tackle the things that he needs to kind of tackle to improve himself as a person. And it's not that he's like accomplishing these things without work, right? He's not necessarily just given the greatest magic ability ever. Like it's shown that he sits there and just practices making a water ball multiple times a day until he just depletes his mana to like increase his mana supply for years, really.
Yeah, well,
like,
that gets like skipped over because you want to see that.
Yeah, like because like there's this idea of like it doesn't really like Rudy's kind of given these things.
He learns all the languages.
Yeah,
like he had to learn how to read. Like that's a whole like part of it where he spends like all this time just learning to read the new language, or even having to like learn to speak the language.
Mm-hmm.
I had to take a drink.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, it very much establishes like he's taking, even with the head start he's been given, of being like able to recognize like things that he wouldn't necessarily be able to at his age under usual circumstance. Even with those things, he still has to put the work in to be able to learn a new language, kind of work on his magic, all this stuff. So it's not like he's just given it, right? but yeah, it is not the focus. I guess the criticism is like it's not necessarily, it doesn't feel earned enough, I guess. Right? Like it doesn't focus on like his struggle enough to where it feels like, okay, yeah, he earned being able to do these things. Like it still feels like he's given it, even the like regardless of the logic kind of behind it.
What's up? Thinking about anything? So I guess do we at all want to get into like specific parts of the video and like maybe respond to like specific things? Because it's kind of just been not really talking around it, but we obviously have not, we
kind of are addressing. I'm literally reading.
I guess we are
transcript. I can talk. We can talk about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
We can get into this. We can get into. This is a big one. This is like the big. One of the big morality things.
The big
of this season.
The big stink about this whole season. Yeah.
I'm a spring a curveball. We're gonna.
All right.
I'm gonna link a Twitter post from the author.
All
since
right.
we're kind of talking about death of the author.
Link that to me, and I'll put it up on stream.
Mentally untouchable.
I guess I'll pick on Beatrice a bit based on like other videos, not necessarily this specific one, because she is very like literalist in a lot of her like in this video specifically. She does say like she would have dropped Mushoku Tensei. It's kind of poorly paced, blah 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 blah. This standard kind of analysis kind of stuff. But she has been very upfront as far as like how she kind of engages in media. As far as like she kind of looks for like reflection of like herself in media. Specifically from what I kind of gathered from like Roger kind of linked to her We Have Forgotten Love video, where it's her kind of doing a bit of like a retrospect of kind of where she's kind of come from her like We've Accepted Mediocrity video.
Yeah.
And she's kind of talking about how she was upset with like media and was like very kind of like she approached it with like more vitriol than she felt like she did now, because she was upset that she wasn't able to find answers about like herself in the media she was consuming. So it's very much like she is consuming media to like see a reflection of herself, right?
Isn't that just like one perspective of how to approach media, though?
It is.
It is.
I kind of talked about it like in my blog. Like I don't identify with that at all, because I've never really approached media in that way. I usually I approach media and like using it as like a way to kind of.
Sounds like a very neoliberal way to approach media. You know what I'm saying?
Media needs to benefit me or something like that. Yeah.
Sounds like kind of a neoliberal approach to media. You know what I'm saying?
You're gonna get us called woke now. God damn it. God damn it.
But yeah, I approach media to like understand different perspectives and like kind of explore the world as like a whole. I guess like I've never really.
Well, that's a question, right? Which is that like, so that's one question. Let's say I watch an indie film about black struggle within a neighborhood that I have absolutely no connection to, and then I say, like, what can I get out of it if it supposedly does not reflect or in.
What am I supposed to get out of the movie Tangerine?
Yeah, like what, like, I've never become a black trans prostitute.
Neither have I.
Like what do I get out of it?
Yeah. What how does it's
like what if I don't get something out of it? Like,
does that mean
like,
it's bad?
It seems like such a weird end to approach media.
Well, because you have like then it's like, oh well, media must
because like if I don't get something out of it, my default response would be, for the people who would get something out of it, what do they get out of it?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how I've always approached.
I feel like that was my default response to that.
I always want to like gain a greater appreciation for something, right? Like even if I don't enjoy it on just like that kind of surface level of like just the pacing, visuals, or whatever, like I don't want to engage in a discourse just to like shit on the show.
Yeah.
Like maybe initially, and it's not like I'm you know, we all kind of indulged in it when we were younger and stuff, but like maybe initially there might be some catharsis in that, but like ultimately I don't want to like waste my time just saying like, oh, this show is bad. Like I would like to have like a greater appreciation for the show and like understand like, oh, this is why someone else might like, this is what someone else might see in the show.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate like different perspectives on the same kind of media.
And you get that just, you know, from talking with people who, you know, don't see things the way you do, and you just, it's like what we talked about in the last stream, you know, it's not a debate or anything. No, it's not like, you know, one side needs to be right, one side needs to be wrong. You can just talk about your different perspective and exchange them.
Shut up. No.
I'm sorry.
So leading into that, right? Like death of the author is very much a thing in interpreting works, but it also is important to kind of note that like where the work comes from is going to be from like their experience in general, like in a broad sense. Like with Mushoku Tensei specifically, he's grown up in Japan, whenever he was born. Like his experience has very much shaped how he was able to like form this world and this story, this text. So it's interesting to be able to kind of look at the like cultural threads and, you know, the things that kind of happened around it that could have led to the, you know, what you see in the work. Like whether or not he was conscious of it like directly as he was writing it is kind of irrelevant, right? Like just because he wasn't conscious of it doesn't necessarily mean that there's not some kind of intentionality to it.
Yeah,
like maybe he had like that subconscious link of like, maybe we'll get into a little bit here because we got the link pulled up. You know, slavery and exploitation and like anime figures, right? That link might have been there. Maybe he didn't have that sort of intentional kind of thing when he wrote that specifically. We don't really know, but that doesn't disregard that is a, you know, valid reading, or there's some like actual link kind of to it. But I've got it pulled up here because we'll get into the big moral thing that people really hate about the second season. And that's
boy.
In episode, they
6?
fucking do this stupid shit. Is it 6 or is it 7?
Oh, I guess that is the great question, because there's an episode 0 and we don't know how to navigate that. God damn it.
So in the second most recent episode as of recording, Rudius goes out with another couple of characters and they embark on the American tradition of buying a slave.
The American tradition. Very interesting. Did you know we invented slavery, guys?
America, in
USA,
Japan,
USA,
in another
USA.
We were the best slave owners, all right?
America. We didn't invent it, but we perfected it. And then we abolished
it. We ended slavery, guys.
Okay, but yeah, so this is the big moral kind of quandary, is why even like show slavery in this work? And the author kind of posted this. I think it was a direct response to like the response to people seeing that in the anime.
Yeah, do you have a better translation for this, by the way? Because this kind of sucks.
There is one on anime. I wanted to post that one because that's the actual what he said.
Yeah, the Anime News Network translation.
Okay.
Anime News Network does have a translation, and if you want to pull it up, I brought it up because it was posted in the comments.
Okay. Thank you.
And I guess this was.
So there's 2 tweets and there's 2 articles. So you gotta pull up the other one too.
Oh, dude.
What's the other one? Oh, there's a okay.
By the way, I think so I'm pretty sure it is kind of a response to it, but another thing is I'm pretty sure he just kind of like tweets out random shit about it, like when it's airing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily like fully
not
like
a direct kind of like justification.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's just talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
But you probably did see people talk about it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
See that's the author's thoughts.
So yeah, I guess let's just about Rudius. He doesn't really have any feelings of hatred for slavery. He feels like it's not necessarily the case that all slaves are universally unhappier as slaves than they were before becoming slaves. So while kidnapping is evil, he can't say with certainty that slavery itself is evil, and doesn't want to impose his own sense of justice upon a culture he is unfamiliar with. And then
there's another article that Gil posted.
Which maybe this is stemming from the fact that when I translated this, it was translated as in first person because Japanese. Which maybe that's also a problem.
Yeah.
But then he did have to then tweet out, "I'd like to explain myself as I don't condone slavery personally. However, it is true that I wrote Rudius as someone who is not averse to slavery. Also, the original story is written with a kind of mild setting where it is accepted that slavery is a normal thing in this world. It is what it is. Because of this, there is no point in making excuses for my actions."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
People kind of took this as an apology. I don't view this as an apology. I think this is literally just oh wait, I don't fucking condone slavery.
Yeah.
Don't take my word. It's like a covering his own ass kind of don't look into that.
A clarification for people who needed it?
Yes, which it sounds insane because I don't know why you would need this clarification. Clearly, obviously the author doesn't condone slavery. It's a fucking story.
Yeah.
But people tend to have this kind of very misshapen view of people.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a disconnect here, right? Because we're reviewing this as a Western audience. The way that Japanese kind of generally view slavery is not. It's not necessarily this. It's not necessarily that it's better.
Well,
it's different, right?
Well, here in the U.S., slavery is a contentious political topic for many reasons. Whereas, I would imagine that in the Japanese education system, Japan's own history with slavery, which there's a history there. It's not the same as the U.S., of course, but that's probably not as drilled into their heads as it is here in the U.S. Going through school. So, obviously, U.S. has a very, especially very recent...
LDP is also, the Liberal Democratic Party, people don't know. Or
of course, rather conservative when it comes to this stuff.
Rather conservative, and they've been known, they have a history of censoring
and of course,
things war crimes from schools.
And of course, there are lasting vestiges and effects of slavery in the U.S. that have pervaded into the modern time. And talking about that is a politically contentious topic. All that sort of stuff. It makes sense that obviously us as Americans, or I guess Joe in your context Canadian, are going to have a bit more of a
Canadians are Americans too.
I'm Southeast Asian, bro.
A viscerally.
That's true. Joe is a product of slavery.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, didn't we have a Joe who's former slave reacts to Rising of Shield Hero or something?
Hell yeah.
But it's one of those things.
The Lao were enslaved.
Korean doesn't like Japan for a reason, yeah, stuff like that. Which obviously it's part of Japanese history, but it's not necessarily a very conscious part of Japanese history, slavery is in the U.S.
All this kind of stuff doesn't even have to be couched in context of culture. It's a fictional piece of work.
That's the other thing, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is not a philosophical treatise telling me how to live my moral life.
Mm-hmm.
Piece of work.
Yeah.
I don't in Stellaris, you can have a slave empire, and the game will never punish you for it. In fact, procedurally speaking, you benefit greatly from being a slaving
arguably,
empire.
No, not even that. Arguably,
that is
the best builds in the game revolve around genocide.
Yeah.
Which maybe I should just
nobody out there is being all Stellaris kind of sus, kind of sus. When is the game ever going to punish you for being a genocidal slaving empire?
I'm just saying, if the characters in Mushoku Tensei were not humanoid at all, people wouldn't have an issue.
Like, why is this supposed to be some moral treatise?
Can you imagine the slave girl
look at the show and be I can look at the show and be like,
Can you imagine the slave girl was like an animal? Like a dog or something?
Oh, yeah.
like Shield Hero.
Well, kind of,
like
more like an actual animal that's sentient.
What?
Okay.
They probably wouldn't even care, even if it was like sentient.
He buys a talking mule.
Yeah.
If it were like a yellow like rat that like I don't know, shot electricity.
You're describing Pokemon.
Oh.
What?
Yeah.
Is that Pokemon? What?
Yeah, you can buy Pokemon.
I know what you're referring to.
You can buy Pokemon at the casino.
Yeah, oh yeah, you
That's
can.
How you
get
Porygon.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, it'd be okay if they like contextualized it in the story as like their servitude was like just partnership, right? That'd be fine.
Right.
It wouldn't be problematic.
Yeah, if it's shown that they want
a partnership where I don't pay them, yeah.
Yeah, if it's shown that they want it, it's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
My Charizard can fight for me. I don't have to pay him.
It's consensual.
Lex asks, would the difference be that a written work can be interpreted as condoning something, whereas a game puts that decision entirely on the player?
Well, a written work doesn't really condone anything. A written work makes no claims.
I guess
the reader interprets the claim.
I guess Lex's point is like a written work is linear, and so it is kind of forcing you to engage with it, whereas it's kind of more optional.
You do have the option to not enslave character like Pops and Stellaris.
I mean, you do have the option to not do it, but the game incentivizes you to do it.
Yeah.
And the meaning of a game emerges in its procedures. It would be like, yes, technically, you could play a fighting game and just run away the entire time and then say, I'm a pacifist. But games heavily reward you for playing the way that it wants you to play.
Here we go. I've got Stellaris stuff on stream now.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Oh,
the thing though, at the same time, is that like questions about what a text is telling us is always going to be negotiated by the perspective of the reader that is consuming it. Mm-hmm. This is the fundamental core of the issue ever since the Gutenberg galaxy and the question of who looks at the frame of any particular projection of a thing. Because all of this kind of stuff it's literally the Jamesonian project, right? Just like, why are we taking a look at the literalism that emerges within these moral questions when we should be questioning why do these premises have to be the way they are? Why do they have to be the way they are? We don't even have to ask the question of like, why does Rudy have to be okay with slavery? Why does slavery even have to exist in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Why do the institutions which exist to give slavery its power exist in the first place? This is a fantasy world. It can be anything.
So, the criticism...
Why does war exist in Mushoku Tensei? It doesn't have to.
Yeah.
It's a fantasy world.
That's what we've gone into. It's because people will make that kind of argument for slavery. Like, oh, you don't need to have slavery in this world. And it's like, yeah, that's true.
You don't have to have war. It's a fantasy world.
Oh,
it's all
what about
fictional.
everything else?
It doesn't have to exist this way. But we're okay with very specific things because it's all about the perspective
poverty,
of the reader.
We're okay with war. We're okay with murder. We're okay with all these bad things happening in this world. But slavery or maybe rape, like that's not okay. Like you can't have that in a fantasy story.
In their channel, they were kind of making like this argument of like fantasy is linked to morals, right? Like as if like presenting
What does that mean?
Presenting like these things in a work has to be like condemned in the work explicitly.
Why?
I couldn't tell you. There
were entire slave empires in Game of Thrones. People don't harp on it for its slavery.
Mm-hmm.
They actually harp on it.
I guess maybe it's also.
I would say they harp on it for its questionable cinematography, but
Oh my god! This really is our most controversial stream yet.
Oh my god.
So it's one of those things as well where you could also consider maybe like, is that more indicting of the player?
Wait. What does this person say? Silphic, poverty, war, and murder are less systemic. What?
What does that mean?
What the fuck does that mean?
Poverty, war, and murder are only systemic.
Literally.
They only occur on the level of the system.
Yeah.
Especially war and poverty.
Only happens on the level of the system.
Yeah, poverty. Yeah, poverty is a very like systemic thing.
Poverty is a system. What?
So it's also one of those things where it's like, I don't know, is me choosing to enslave things in Stellaris, is that an immoral choice? Because I just think it's fun.
Well, I mean,
video game.
I meant war and poverty are less intentionally systemic.
So the answer to the Stellaris slavery thing is that like slavery is an interactive shorthand for something else.
Yes. Oh yeah.
It's a shorthand.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why that's kind of important to this question, because I don't know how useful talking about something like this is necessarily, because I think it's more so a sort of shorthand for something like power.
You
know,
mm-hmm.
The question of
Control.
just like why is slavery a thing that has to be sort of normalized in this fantasy world shouldn't simply be what are the author's thoughts on slavery? What does the author really think about slavery? Sus.
Mm-hmm.
It should be like, why did the author deem this particular transactional relationship necessary for the plot of the story to act the way it is?
Yes.
If you want to play this clip, because this is like the actual edit. It was in the video. I was thinking it was in their channel. But if you want to,
I need to start stop reading the chat. So,
well, I'm just watching Sonic's chat,
right,
so I have no idea what the chat is saying.
That's not gonna take you the time code. Sorry.
For all I know, the chat could be all like, Joe is on full brain rot right now. And you know what? That's fair. That's totally fair. I've been drinking 2-year-old beer.
Oh, actually,
Jesus
the chat has just been saying chug this whole time.
I could be a chubby at you. I could be a chubby Emu video.
Nightmare.
Okay, so that is the link to if y'all wanna. I don't know if we're all in.
Until I clarify, right?
Streaming.
Yeah, it's not streaming.
Oh, right. Yeah, I'm not streaming. Oh, sorry. My bad.
Until I clarify to anybody who's like curious.
That's that fucking taking chaps. So sorry. That's so fucking funny. They inherently emerge in every world. Dog, what? Poverty's not inherent, dog. Come on. What the fuck?
What about poverty?
Silphic said, like poverty and war, kind of inherent to groups existing. They inherently
don't have to, though.
In every world. Slavery is less so that.
They don't have to. It's a fantasy world.
This is what we call. There's a guy.
Who's like this is okay.
The world?
Let me explain. In a fantasy world, you have a concept of magic.
Mm-hmm.
Magic completely bucks the ideology of scarcity.
Yeah, it's like
you can literally use the wackadoo magic powers to create a literal communist utopia.
Is this just capitalist
using
realism
magic
at work?
The fantasy world is the one place where, in theory, you can reach communism without the transitional modes of vanguarding.
Literally, yeah.
Because you have magic. It's a fictional world. But we are so okay with the concept of things like racism and war and poverty in this fantasy world.
Well, so this is what Beatrice specifically had to say about like morals and like fantasy.
Okay.
This year.
Doesn't poverty no longer exist in Star Trek?
It does.
I don't know enough about Star Trek. Star Trek.
Well, for what? Okay, I have never watched.
All right.
Never. I've only watched J.J. Abrams' Star Trek. Right. My engagement with Star Trek has been just Red Letter Media.
Yeah, same.
But yeah, from what I understand from then, yeah, they.
I watched a couple episodes that Jaden showed me. I was like, wow, this is boring.
From what I understand, like the concept of scarcity has like been a basically like
Star Trek's post scarcity
destroyed, like abolished, whatever. So like, people just kind of do jobs for prestige in a way.
I mean, the concept of scarcity is effectively a byproduct of modernism.
Yeah. Here's what Beatrice says specifically about moral.
It's a made-up story. So this is a funny, weird thing. There were some people who were defending this because they're like, "How dare you ascribe morals to fantasy?"
Okay.
I don't, but I do think it says something about you, whatever you fantasize about. And it probably informs the way that you behave in other aspects of your life, depending on what you.
That anti-law counter argument from Beatrice.
But it's all a question about proximity, right? Like the question is ultimately about a question of proximity. Is that like, so to sort of turn the question around, right? Which is that like, it's never about like, it's not about the idea of like why we have to take the argument of it's fantasy seriously. Is that like, it breaks down real fast, because if you say something like, I got a problem with the slavery in this thing, you kind of end up having to extend it to like, okay, well, why are you not having a problem with the war? Why are you not having a problem with stratification? You know, like, why are you not having a problem with these particular things? Yeah. And it's because, you know, you see those things as immutable. Yeah. You see those things as part and parcel of, in Althusser's terms, the imagined relations of existence to our real concrete modes, you know, of production.
Is this like just this is basically, isn't this just capitalist realism?
It could take the form of capitalist realism.
Okay.
But it's kind of like but like that's the fundamental thing, right? It's that I think you should have an issue with slavery in Isekai. I think you should. Let's be clear. I think you should. You absolutely should. But the question is not to throw it out as a moral failure, because you're going to lose on the argument of it being a moral failure. There's so many things in fantasy that have moral issues, like war, right? That like are never addressed, but are taken simply as natural because, you know, that's just what we're okay with.
That's the world we live in. Yeah.
You know, like in No Game, No Life, there is no war. They fight each other using games.
Yeah.
You know? Like, so like, it's not even a situation just like, this is simply a natural byproduct of the human condition. Well, it's not, because there's magic. There are living, breathing gods that can dictate the rules of the fantasy world.
Yeah. Let's see what she says.
In baseball isekai, they have to fight using baseball.
It's like, you know, it's like, you know, if you like a something like Yojo Senki or something, or it's like, yeah, you create a fantasy world that is like built around war. Does that mean you love war? It very well might. Look at something like Gate. But also it may not. It's not a like one-to-one causal link.
Well, I think that's one of the things, right? Is that like, here's the thing that, so on the Yojo Senki thing, I think Yojo Senki is a really good example, because Yojo Senki employs war as a discussion of what Althusser calls expressive causality. Expressive causality is a second form of... So when we think of causality, right, in structuralist theory, there are three types of causality. There's linear causality, which is the sort of Cartesian A affects B kind of causality. Right. There is expressive causality, which is causality where something affects something as a result of a broader, greater totality. So he calls it a totality. So a really good example is like a game of billiards. So let's say I take the pool cue and then I hit the ball, and then the ball hits the other ball, and then that ball goes into the hole. And then somebody says, why does the ball go into the hole? And then the linear causal mechanistic answer is, well, that's because I hit ball A hits ball B goes into the hole. You know, there's a linear explanation. The expressive explanation is, well, I hit it because that's what the game wants. The game, it's an expression of a game's rules. You know,
Mhm.
there's a unity of the game that has made me do it, that makes that thing happen.
Yeah.
And so where was I going with this?
Oh, you were
I don't
talking
know,
about
Joe. Where were you going?
we were talking about causal links between,
Yes.
fantasy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Yojo Senki is really interesting because
Really,
Yojo Senki uses war as a way to sort of think about what Marshall Berman calls modernism as energy in excess of humanity's ability to interpret it. Where there is just a constant need for war, and the constant need for war is manifest in this sort of like religious affirmation by like being X, right? Being X constantly wants the praise, despite like this continual machinery of war. And so like the thing here is that like war is treated as this thing constantly in motion in Yojo Senki, but it uses war despite it very rarely actually criticizes war as a machine. Like you can see like the effects of it, but they're very thin and they don't show up very often. But more so, war is used as a way to critique the sort of system that continually generates it. But like that's a sort of meaning that we can more helpfully come to if we stop thinking about like war as like as a pedagogical tool, you know? If we stop thinking about like war as like is this thing telling me that war is bad or not? And more so, well, what is war being used in this narrative for? Like, what is it? What might I be getting from how it depicts and navigates the subject of war? And I feel like there's a sort of under discussion about slavery in Isekai on those grounds, because it's not great. And there's a sort of the witting lack of criticism regarding slavery, but I think it's also a very apropos subject because it's fundamentally about like a digitized control. You know?
Yeah. Well, it's one of those
simulating
things,
a very specific kind of relationship.
It's one of those things where, at least on like what I've seen, in Isekai, slavery rarely feels like it's a systemic issue. It's something really just ingrained to like so many aspects of the world. In something like Death March, for example, Gil, you could probably speak more on this. It's kind of there for him to just get people to hang out with. Essentially, it's not like the world is not really a clear slave society, like you would see in something like Vinland Saga.
Yeah, so there are like slaves, but it's kind of similar to like its depiction like Shield Hero, where like there's you just kind of like will see like he first gets to the world and goes like to town, and the town's like pretty normal, but then there's like also like slaves doing like manual labor, right? So effectively like doing manual labor. That's kind of it. And the two slaves that he gets in the beginning, the three slaves he gets in the beginning are actually owned by someone else. And then he basically immediately kind of critiques like their treatment because he's like, "Oh shit, that's terrible." And then the demon, which he unintentionally uncovers because there's like this demon trying to like scam people. Opens up a labyrinth, right? And they all kind of fall into it. And then through that, he falls into it with the three slaves, and that enters the mechanic of the party system. He parties with them.
Yeah.
Like he gives them weapons, he kind of commands them in the sense of like, A attacks, then B attacks, then C attacks, that kind of thing. Like you do this move. That kind of thing. It's very game logic-y.
So, Digital Devil Girl is asking like how we feel about specific criticism. Mushoku Tensei doesn't handle slavery well. Like it's handled lightly, or is it strange that Rudius, who's like someone from the modern world who should know better, is okay with it?
Well, I think you can go.
So I wanted to point out, Beatrice points to Vinland Saga as a like specific counter example to Mushoku Tensei. We kind of talked about this before the stream, but so you know where I'm going with it.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about Mushoku Tensei. I'm just here to shill Leadale.
Guys, check out Leadale. Guys, watch Leadale.
Watch Leadale.
So she uses the example in episode 1 in which Thorfin's father buys a slave who has been like who escapes from the farm that he's on and like is on the like brink of death and is about to be like beaten probably to death by his slave owner.
Spoilers for the first episode, by the way.
Yes, this is the first episode. It's not like a major thing.
Yeah.
So he offers to buy the slave, and like after haggling, he ends up paying essentially 3 times the price for the slave. And she holds it up as like a very morally upstanding thing that he like shows like how strong of a character Thor's is. And I don't disagree, right? Like it is a like he's actively eating into his own resources so that this person can die essentially as a free man, and not have to die a slave.
Yes.
But the problem when we start like criticizing media for how like it kind of presents these kind of topics morally, if you take that example, right, we can kind of break it down where it's like, well, what did Thor's accomplish here? Like, yes, there was demonstrable good for the individual, but for context, they criticize Mushoku Tensei for Rudy actively engaging in the slave trade. Well, that's essentially what Thor's has done here, right? Yeah. He has paid 3 times the market value for this one slave so that he can die a free man. He is essentially damning 3 other people to live as a slave underneath this person who has worked this person to this point. Is that necessarily morally good? Like,
so that boils down to whether you fall on the side of like the deontological like side of its morality or its consequentialism.
Yeah. Something bad with xenolinguistics. That's interesting. I've not seen this tech before.
Oh my god.
Well, yeah. So yeah. What I'm saying is it like is this an action that is inherently bad, or is it a thing that ultimately depends on the outcome, essentially?
Well, it's important to note that they directly criticize Rudy for engaging in the slave trade. Yes, they do criticize him for his nonchalant attitude toward it, but they explicitly say at one point he is actively engaging in the slave trade. And that is exactly what Thor's did in the example they gave as the counterexample.
This is kind of semantic, but like he actually engaged less with it because he didn't pay for the slave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, do you get it like a...
Rudy doesn't actually own that slave.
He used a coupon.
Does.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Does. The prince paid for and owns the slave.
He paid full price for a Papa John's pizza.
I guess it's really semantic, but like, I mean, Rudy did not buy a slave here.
Right. Wasn't he just in the room at the time or something?
Sylphie, basically, there's an issue because, the prince wants to make figures like Rudius does.
Mm-hmm.
The prince is has superhuman strength, and does not have the ability to craft it like with his hands, right? He just breaks everything.
Mm-hmm.
So he's trying to come up with solutions. He's trying to teach him how to do it like with magic, but he can't do it. And it's like, okay, like what's the solution here? Well, he talks to Sylphie about it. Sylphie says, I kind of came across something similar to this, and they bought like a slave in order for them to do the magic. Like they bought the slave for particularly the usage of them using magic. And Rudy's like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
He been nonchalant, yes, but not really like, it's nonchalant. That's kind of all it is. It's not like particularly moral. He's not really morally siding with it one way or the other. He's not like rooting for it or anything, but he's not
he's not the protagonist
putting it down
of
either.
Isekai Make You, who is immediately like, I gotta get me a fucking sex slave.
I gotta get me a sex slave.
Oh my god! I don't know why I did like a quasi Australian accent for that character.
But then Rudius basically tells the prince to do that because he's like, yeah, I guess you could do that way, and he's like, all right, sure, and then go to the slave market and they buy a slave.
So that's interesting because it reminds me of this like part in Moto Sekai Ichi. It's a story about a guy who loses his like account and then he like commits suicide because he was like the top ranked player, and then he like gets reincarnated into the fantasy world like of the game. But like he gets reincarnated as like
he's a real gamer.
Yeah, he's a real gamer. He gets reincarnated as like his alt account. And there's a one part where he's just like, we need to create like a team. So he's trying to like create a party, like a real like bona fide party, and he's able to find everybody except for one specific build. And he's like, okay, we need a high dex character, but the problem is high dex characters are just like not people we can easily get on the budget we got. And so like he's running through all the solutions that are possible, and then there's this really interesting part where he says, so he's like running it through with his teammate, and there's this really interesting part where he says, there's one thing we can do in terms of how to get a high dex teammate. That is, and then like there's like a page flip for like the punchline where he says like, we get a slave. And then he like braces himself in the panel to be attacked by her. He's like bracing himself. He's flinching because like he thinks she's gonna get attacked. And then his teammate says, no, that's a good idea. And then he was just like really taken aback by that. That's interesting because like this kind of reminds me of like those like ethical consumption under capitalism kind of scenarios.
Yeah.
Because like the institution that exists there is so much larger than the person trying to grapple with.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter whether or not you buy the slave. Someone's gonna buy that damn slave.
And this is not to legitimize slavery, because I feel like people will take that the wrong way, right?
Yeah.
But like I feel like there are very similar threads that exist in like this discussion, in that you will see in discussions about, you know, like claims of like there's no ethical consumption in the capitalism. You know, like our phones are made with slave labor. Like that's the fundamental point of it.
Yeah.
But I think like a lot of people sort of, and I think most people kind of ended on the sort of, I think a lot of people ended on the sort of, they cut the morality off at the level of the product. Like you don't buy a phone because you like, yeah, fuck you.
I love slavery. I love child
slavery.
Yeah, you know. Yeah.
Like that's what makes it palpable, but it's weird because like the transaction, the end goal is not the transaction, but it is the service provided by the existence of the slave. But we don't actually benefit from that thing. We only see the transaction. So there feels like there's like a sort of a gap in the simulation here.
So
trying to navigate this wild drinking 2-year-old beer. This is very off-putting.
And then, well, I'm trying to play Stellaris at the moment. Yeah.
Bro, that's a toddler.
This is a complicated topic.
Going back to the
drinking a child.
Going back to like the other part of the question of like, is it weird that Rudy is like nonchalant towards slavery? Kinda, yes. Kinda. Yeah, I mean,
it's
but
very
that's kind of the point.
But the corollary question is that like, what should he do to be cool?
Yeah, what is the counterfactual?
What's the cool thing? What's the thing that Rudy got to do?
What's the counterfactual you want to see?
Yeah.
So like, okay, so
we are dealing with fiction. We could work with counterfactuals, you know?
Yeah.
To play devil's like, there's the arguments here of like, you know, someone would buy that slave anyway. To play devil's advocate, the argument against that would be just don't have slavery. Have it to where he trains an apprentice, right?
We can't. So then, the counter argument to someone will buy that slave anyways is a really bad counter argument, because like that's how imperialism gets normalized. If I don't take your land, somebody else is gonna.
Yeah.
You know, like Like that's how that's the extractive logic of like a lot of imperialism.
Right.
You know, like, bro, if we don't take the entirety of Africa, the Belgians will. You know.
Right. But the institution of slavery will still exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
like regardless of like Rudy's actions, which that makes me wonder. Like, do people think that he could like shift that, like change that?
Like
people, I've literally seen people say that Rudius is powerful enough to do that, and I don't agree. Rudius is strong, but he's not strong enough to take on a fucking kingdom.
This is kind of like
very few Isekai protags can actually like run a revolution. There's literally Choyuyu. Choyuyu was literally about that. 7 overpowered Naro protags still could not they still cannot overturn institutions.
And you have one guy teaching fucking capitalism to a poor girl.
Just reading them the like U.S. Constitution.
Honestly, Choyuyu is a very interesting piece of work.
Funny as fuck, dude. I need to watch more of it. I got just annoyed. I was like, this guy's literally giving her a fucking like hustle grind set lesson. I was just so pissed off.
I don't think we want to discuss spoilers.
Not light novel spoilers.
So I guess the question is like how necessary was him to get the slave?
Yes. So that's kind of what this kind of boils, because like their argument is going to be it wasn't necessary to engage in this, and if it was, they point to like the Sword Isekai here recently, where they say that is good like power fantasy, because like they basically stomp like every slaver they come across, and so that's like cathartic in that way, that they are actively staunchly against the institution of slavery. And in this case, for Mushoku Tensei, the argument is that it's problematic or it's bad because it isn't presenting that in that way. So I think it still presents slavery. So in a way, it's like condoning it because it's not actively condemning it in the text.
So I think this is actually kind of interesting because it feels more like an indictment of neoliberal ideology. So if you take an example of the Sword Dad one, right? He only kills because Fran kills. Yeah. And Fran kills because she was a slave.
Yeah.
Her motivations are fundamentally like tied deeply to the core of her as a character. It seems Rudy is not getting involved because he was not a slave. He was never a slave, which is a really shitty thing to have as a character trait. But that's like a neoliberal idea. That's an element of neoliberalism.
So there's two parts to it to me, right? Kind of addressing like it being weird for Rudy to be okay with it first. To me, it speaks more to how he kind of like interfaces and engages with the world, right? He is very much he's not really viewing himself as a denizen of the world. It's very much gamified, like explicitly gamified. Like you see in season 2, or sorry, core 2 of season 1. Okay. You see that there's a part where he's actively trying to gamify the act of like saving children, where he's like, if we hold on to the last second, then we can maximize our hero points and be extra cool, and it actively leads to their deaths because he's not taking it as seriously as a person who is like a normal denizen of the world would, where like Rudrid and Eris are just like, Rudy, what the fuck, dude?
Okay.
Why did you stop us? Like, what was the thinking there? And the thinking is he's disconnected from the world. He lived 30 some odd years in another world completely. Rudy is almost like Isekai is very tied to game logic, right? Rudy is almost like his, I guess I don't know if he has a name in the light novel, but he's almost like his avatar. This is like kind of actively explored even in like this season, where there's like this disconnect in like his ego and his id, where like the inner Rudy, like his inner voice, is like, oh, I'm gonna sleep with Sarah here, and we're gonna do this and this, and his body rejects it. Like it's just like, no, like he has erectile dysfunction. Everyone's memeing on it, but that's basically what it is this disconnect in like his older kind of spirit, like his id and like his ego.
Okay.
So this is very much like a matter of like has this disconnect from the world, and so he's not interacting with the world as a normal person would. And so what's kind of like notable with how, you know, Gil was describing the scene, right? He's not the like he's approaching the problem as if it were a game problem, right?
Yeah.
He's like, I have this, you know, this problem. Zenoba cannot make figures. I don't know how to solve it. So he's trying to actively solve it. He is not the one that comes up with the solution of the slave. It is Sylphie, who is a denizen of the world, who is is not against the system and is normalized to her.
Yeah.
He takes that as a solution in the system, and he's like, oh yeah, that is an option. And they take
Which
that
he
option.
did not come to because he's not from the world.
Right, like it wasn't normal to him, but when it was presented, it's like, oh, light bulb, like, oh, okay, yeah, that is an option, and so they go through with it. There's not that moral, like they always say, like moral dilemmas in video games don't necessarily work because you're not approaching the moral quandary as if it were a true
save child.
Yeah, well, I approach it in a very utilitarian fashion, where I'm like, how does it benefit me?
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's how most people do.
It's like it's the BioWare morality meter, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
It's just like
so if BioWare didn't like actively kind of reward you more for doing the Paragon option, or like, you know, Bethesda games, or who, like any pick your moral system. If they didn't reward you more, people would just, I mean, there would be more people that would take the evil option, because it would give you more resources. It would be more of a benefit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you take a look at like BioShock, like that whole moral system kind of falls apart because like you only get more in the short term, and in the long term, it pays more off to pays you more. Gosh, I'm throwing words. It pays off more to take the good route because you get more items in the end. That's how people kind of approach these kind of moral dilemmas in video
I don't want
games.
to do the genocide route in Undertale because it will actually fuck up every other time I try to play the game.
So yeah, it's, like the fact that Rudy is engaging in the world almost as a video game is kind of it informs how he's kind of disconnected from the morality of it, because he is viewing it as problems and like how to solve these problems. He's not necessarily engaging with it on a moral level like a normal denizen would. So that's why there's a disconnect in like his morals.
Mentioned an interesting term. He said there's a reason D&D has the term murder hobo.
I've never heard of that.
Which is someone, well, according to Wiktionary, a character who wanders the game world unattached to any community, indiscriminately killing and looting.
Yeah,
Bro, that's just a bandit.
That sounds like it sounds like your average Kenshi playthrough.
Well, it makes sense though, right? I mean, that's like you know, you just treat the world as ability to
a really great example of this, by the way,
right?
is that
like
you know, like the traveling merchants in Elden Ring. Realistically, anytime you see one, you just kill them.
Oh yeah,
and then get their bell and give it to the one lady at the round table.
The beneficial thing is to murder them.
Yes,
that's the peak efficiency of Elden Ring is you kill the fucking wandering fucking merchants who either treat you very nicely or are scared of you.
Yeah,
you just kill them. But I don't want to do it.
I don't want to. I feel like an asshole.
Also, the reward is not that great, to be honest. But...
No, you can just buy their items and then fuck off.
Yeah.
They
don't really sell that much anyway.
The crafting system also makes it so like less. Anyways.
So the other side of that, I said there was this two-part. That is why Rudy kind of engages it the way he does, and why it is weird. It's supposed to be weird. He's disconnected from the world.
Yeah, I don't think they're supposed to view it like all these people who are like, oh, I can't believe Mushoku Tensei did this, and it's like, that's the point. The point is that you're supposed to be weirded out by how nonchalant he is.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand these people who are like, I can't believe this person with already flawed morals has a flawed moral perspective. Crazy.
So,
I don't get it.
In the interest of fairness,
like a Joker, man.
For
he's like El Joker.
Why are people so shocked? I don't fucking get it. You not paying attention?
The interest of fairness for like their argument is like, that doesn't, they dislike Rudy, and like they have a problem because like they're being told this is a redemption story, and then these things happen which set Rudy back. That is like their kind of complaint. That's kind of where they're coming from what I've seen. But so the second part of this is like why there is slavery in this like text, right? Mm-hmm. Why it even has to exist. And obviously the fact that the slavery exists is not necessarily a, adequate kind of explanation. You can't say, well, slavery exists, so it exists in this text. Mm-hmm. Like they're looking for like justification for why they had to engage in the facet of slavery at all. Mm-hmm. So Gil and Joe could probably speak better to the history of like slavery and isekai in general. As far as like Mushoku Tensei, I don't think it's incidental, and they kind of touched on it, that they're actively linking, them getting the slave for Zenoba to make figures. They are getting exploited labor to make trinkets and figures for a privileged ruling class, right? To me, that's not incidental, and it's something that's kind of been built up to this point, with him having the anime figures like that. First, initially, it was just like, probably just a holdover of, his kind of how he kind of interacted with the world as a hikikomori. Mm-hmm. Like he wanted to collect figures or whatever, and so in this world, he's like, oh, I want to make my own figures to entertain myself, because that's still a hobby that he enjoyed. And then when it came to like spreading Rujid's kind of spreading Rujid's kind of praises, or getting his name out there, he gave people figures as a way for them to kind of be like, look, this guy is so cool, kind of thing. Like it was an evolution of just him, how he kind of engaged with that hobby as like an otaku from a previous life. And so this is kind of another evolution of that, where you have, and it's not incidental that they linked the fucking Roxy figure to the actual figure of like the cast off, clothing and stuff like that. Like it's not like these things are lost on the author. So when they introduce this person who is a slave making these figures, it is very much like a kind of commentary on like the exploitative labor of how they exploit like figure companies and like this, factory workers in other countries to make these figures for the Japanese populace who just want to have like a cool trinket on their shelf.
Right.
Like to me, that seems like a very kind of obvious thing. But obviously, like there's also kind of the history of, slavery in isekai in general, right?
I mean, well, there's a very easy and straightforward answer as to why slavery on a narrative level exists in isekai. And that's because most isekai protagonists are going to be people who don't really have particular... The whole crux of isekai is that, like, there's no way out in this world, so another world has to suffice.
Right.
It's a critique of atomized relations stressed to their most alienating levels in neoliberal capitalism. Like that's literally what it is. There's a reason why Isekai came out after the survival type story boom.
Yeah.
There's a reason why Sword Art Online was a death game. So the kind of people who are going to be Isekai protags are going to be people who don't have a lot going for them. Because they're people who are quote-unquote losers.
Yeah, you don't really see someone who's like, I'm on top of the goddamn world right now, and then they get reincarnated into like they killed.
Well, you do see that in Make You Black Company.
But then
Make
he's
You
not
Black Company. That guy was just like, I'm gonna retire at the age of 30.
Interestingly, a lot of them who are like successful and are kind of on top of the world in like Japan, when they die or whatever, or they get transported or whatever to the other world, they often get punished.
Yeah.
Their like life just gets immediately shittier. Like the Yojo Senki is also like that. People forget that Yojo Senki was a fucking like Tanya was a middle manager type asshole who was successful but also a fucking cunt.
Well,
right?
So Make You Black Company is really funny because he's the guy who he got to the point where he was able to save up enough money to retire at the age of 30.
Yeah.
And literally the first day of his retirement, he dies.
Yeah.
He dies and he gets reincarnated as a slave.
As a slave, yeah.
And he's like,
it's funny because it's called Make You Black Company, but it's even worse than Black Companies. Like he's just owned.
Yeah. But so like this is something that like again, so the reason why, when you are in a situation where you are somebody who doesn't have like, so if you're somebody who has like a lot of personality flaws or a lot of like personality issues, or somebody who might not necessarily, and you're in an environment that is very alienating, very difficult, you have to, so as an author, you have to figure out a way for them to like learn about this world in a way that allows the protagonist to be able to navigate, as well as whoever is telling them just doesn't like ditch them.
Right.
Because you have to set up a situation where somebody has to like stick around with the loser long enough for them to stop being a loser. So like the convention of the slave just fulfills that. The slave just literally just fulfills that role. Like they can't leave you. Which is really grim. But the thing here, right, is that like this element, while it is very unfortunate and incredibly uncomfortable, on a sort of substrate performative level, exists in tons of isekai that never get that kind of shit. Any sort of situation where somebody gets reincarnated as a noble and they have a whole gaggle of butlers or maids or whatever, it's the exact same thing. Literally the exact same thing. They act the exact same way. They serve the exact same purpose. If you have a minion that essentially acts as an exposition dump, like in Slime, it is the exact same thing. In Konosuba, Kazuma does not have slaves, but he's got a whole bunch of people around him that have nowhere else to go, so they're just stuck with him. It's the exact same thing.
Well, like for example, right? So an isekai anime that aired earlier this year is Tensei Kisoku no Isekai Boken Roku, which is basically like Aristocrats Otherworld Adventure or whatever the fuck. The guy, so who's like I think a college student or a high school student, I think high school. He dies actually kind of similarly to Rudeus. He dies by saving someone else. Like a guy is robbing this convenience store and he starts lunging at these two girls with a knife, and the main character steps in front of him. And thus dies, right?
Oh yeah, I remember
the main character also
brat.
Yes,
he's a brat.
He also has a strong relationship. He also has a strong relationship with the gods. It's a pantheon, but he also has a strong connection to the god, like Rudeus does with Hitogami, right? But he goes a very different route. One, he's reincarnated as a actual noble or aristocrat, not like a kind of backwater noble like Rudeus is, because Rudeus is kind of born into a noble family, the Grey Rats, but doesn't really have any. He doesn't really have any pull, and it's not like a main house or anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the eighth son isekai, but he's kind of born into like also kind of like that, but he's more aristocratic than that. But he has a bunch of butlers, he has a bunch of maids that follow him throughout his life or whatever. He eventually keeps leveling up as a fucking aristocrat, becomes a baron and all this shit. And the king is, gives him all these things and whatever. And no one ever questions the fact that he just has all these slaves at hand. Even despite the fact that, again, Rudius and him are kind of similar people in the sense that their circumstance in which they died was kind of similar, right? They sacrificed themselves to save someone else. And the outcome is wildly different, right? But we're criticizing Rudy for not even purchasing a slave in this context. I'm pretty sure there's something else in the later in the story or whatever, but whatever. In this context, he does not purchase a slave. He basically recommends purchasing a slave based on the recommendation of someone else, versus someone who has already a staff of butlers. And that's something I wanted to mention too, with the logic of okay, well, he doesn't need to get a slave in order to get the girl to make figures, right? To get a person to make figures in the solution for Zanoba, right?
Right.
But here's the thing, though. What is the other solution? Because you can make an argument about apprenticeship, I guess, but I don't really know, where's Rudius going to get that? Rudius, like we've explained, is kind of just, people don't really trust him a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then secondly, well, maybe he could just get someone and hire them. Well, but that's also exploitation. They're not going to pay him well. They'll pay the person well.
Well, I think so the crux here, right, is they had to get, and there's a thing behind this too, but they had to get a child because to teach them they showed that Sylphie is not able to do it because even though she kind of studied with Rudius, she didn't go about it the exact way that he did, and so she's not able to do it. So they had to get a child that they could teach to do it in that specific way so that it could be done with magic. Yeah. They could have hired somebody to do it the manual way, but I guess that would have been quite different, I guess. And then, of course, the devil's advocate kind of argument for them is, essentially, of course they're gonna get a child and then essentially groom her to be a figure maker, right? So
yeah.
So the core element of why a slave in a sort of narrative sense is it literally just boils down to well, they can never leave you.
Yeah, they gotta leave. Yeah,
they are often. It's interesting because we think of slavery as being a sort of social relation. And a lot of isekai, though, it's like a natural part of the world. It's enforced by magic. It is literally.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Yeah.
It's
so the other thing they
contractual.
Yeah. Another thing they kind of brought up was another thing they had issue with this specifically is how he kind of interacts with her when they actually go to the slave market, because he sees her and he kind of recognizes the look in her eye and essentially asks her, have you given up? Do you want me to ease your suffering? And she responds that she doesn't want to die. And so he's like, okay, that's enough, kind of thing. It doesn't have to be that you have a lust for life, but just not wanting to die is enough that, we can.
Which I think is really interesting. I haven't seen. Okay, maybe you guys have seen this, so let me know. But have people mentioned this? The actually great share of empathy that Rudius passes on to her?
Yes. So I'm gonna play the devil's advocate here.
Okay.
They're saying that this is actually really awful.
Okay.
Because he's essentially saying, so in this video, they kind of misconstrued it as him saying that his life previously, like his previous life, was so bad that he's likening it to the life of this young 6-year-old who has been stripped from her family and forced into slavery. I don't think that's actually the intent, because like, given the narrative of the show, how it's focusing on him getting over losing Eris, I think the intent was to draw the direct parallel with him recognizing he had a lack of a will to live, or like he was close to it, I guess, and he recognizes that similar look in her eye. I don't think it's not necessarily that he's like likening his pain to hers. It's more so that he recognizes that
he recognizes the despair that he himself has faced. He recognizes despair, basically, right, in her.
Right. So he's basically saying like, okay, it's you don't have to have a lust for life, but if you haven't completely just given up, then we can help you in like a way that's not just, you know, euthanasia or whatever. But they're saying that so since they kind of conflated it or misconstrued it as him saying, kind of likening it to his previous life, they're like, well, aren't you happy that you're alive? You know, why do you think it's appropriate to kill her or even give a 6-year-old the option to die when you kind of already kind of experienced this and you came out on the other side and are happy to be alive? That's kind of their perspective.
I think their expansion on that, I feel like the expansion on that would be like, he can save her without enslaving her.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the implication.
Which I understand.
I don't know if that's true or not
logic.
in the story. I don't know if that's like tenable in the story.
Well, it's
But
like,
I think
okay,
that's the
you
argument,
could technically
right? You could save her without enslaving her.
He could take her away and fight off all the people and like make a whole hubbub about it and be a hero and all these things. But it's just like it kind of ends up to this point, right? It kind of ends up to this like kind of goes down this conclusion, right? Which is like, you're wanting something else in this story that the story's not trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine if he like he can you imagine if he buys the slave,
Mm-hmm.
and then he says, "You are free now. By the way, I got you an unpaid internship to work with this guy." That would be cool.
EC in chat actually brings up an interesting point that I've kind of thought of and was going to bring up if I remembered it. Honestly, it kind of fell to the back of my mind, but he says, I feel like Rudy's specific view on death may or may not be slightly warped based on his previous experience, and that life may tie into the disconnected from the world feeling that you mentioned before. I think that is a possibility, right? Because, you know, somebody who has died and been reborn would obviously kind of have a different kind of view on death, right?
Yeah.
Like, to him,
that wouldn't seem as permanent, yeah.
Yeah, to him, for all he knows, she could be reincarnated, you know, like he did. It's not really explicitly kind of engaged with in the text, but I mean, it does kind of explicitly show that he has a different view, at least on his life, like now that he's being reincarnated. Because like when he gets, you know, donut by the dragon warrior god thing, I can't remember what his name was now. He doesn't have the same reaction he did when he died in his previous life, right? Like his previous life, he's like, "Oh shit, am I gonna die?" Like, what? You know, it's kind of a very panicked, like, you know, he's clinging to life kind of thing, and then he dies. When he quote unquote dies the second time, he's just kind of like, I mean, there are still things I wanted to do, but
yeah.
Like it's a very different perspective. So there's at least like precedence in the text at hand that he would have a different kind of viewpoint on death, even if it isn't like explicit that he would just think, oh well, she'll be reincarnated, right? Like that isn't going to be the argument like we're making, but it is something to consider that he would have a different view on that. Which I think, in general, is like, I guess if we kind of want to touch on.
So I guess a question.
Yeah.
Sorry to derail this.
No, you're good.
And this is something that I feel like has not been addressed. What do people want out of these analyses? Because like, I see slavery in Isekai as an extension of a very specific kind of interaction in like a neoliberal space, you know, that is reflected by gamified renditions of human engagements with each other. Other people can see slavery as like the moral test between somebody who is faced with a great evil, a great institutional evil, and whether they succeed or fail in the face of that evil sort of reflects back onto their moral character. I don't see those things as necessarily being like at odds with each other. But then again, I don't really care about like moral readings of a text.
Yeah.
So what do people want out of it? Like what do people want out of the analysis? Well, I know slavery is bad.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fundamentally what I think we're we have is like people don't like the story because it deals with these problematic elements.
Okay.
Perfectly fine. People then also want to be like validated in that, which is why you then get like why these sorts of analyses exist. It's almost like a preaching to the choir kind of thing going on, is what I would say. Like I don't think if you are someone who likes Mushoku Tensei, you're meant to get much out of that.
Okay. Like their analysis, you mean?
Yeah, their analysis.
I think it definitely is like a disconnect in how like people engage with media, right? Like they almost seem to be arguing that this shouldn't exist because of how they kind of engage with media, kind of going back to kind of what we talked about with Beatrice's video on like We Have Forgotten Love, where she engages with media in that specific way. So she's not necessarily getting anything out of engaging with the themes of slavery. Like it's more just like reminding her this terrible, and I'm using her as like it's not necessarily like specifically targeted at her in this case. Like I'm just using her as like a kind of concrete example for what we're talking about. Okay. For her, she doesn't want to engage in something that's just reminding her this terrible thing exists, especially when the text itself is like a power fantasy, like escapist power fantasy that is indulging in the escapist power fantasy elements in a way that's not beneficial for that. Like people kind of directly, not her specifically, but people kind of directly talked about the sword isekai because they're like, I really enjoyed how she just killed every slaver she came across. Like that would be an example of like empowerment for them, right? It's just pure indulgence in taking out these awful people. Okay. She's not necessarily wanting to engage in like the idea of slavery as like a more nebulous thing in like the world. She's viewing it like she's viewing the text in a way of like finding herself, is kind of how she's put it.
Yeah.
And she's not finding anything in engaging in someone she views as a piece of shit human being engaging in these piece of shit systems. Like she's not viewing it from like a cultural or like wider lens of like, so how did these systems kind of manifest from, you know, this person's experience, and what is it kind of commentating on. Like, she is engaging with it on the level of, this is bad, the text is not appropriately condemning it, so the text itself is bad.
Yeah, that's kind of weird, right? Because I feel like this is something where, like, if you're familiar with the concept of the political unconscious and Jameson's 3 horizons, the thing that Jameson notes, right, is that, like, so, like, in a text there are 3 horizons, right? Three horizons, and the first one is like the symbolic level. The symbolic level, like, what do these mean? What do they do? Why are they doing these particular things? The second one is like the cultural one. The culture that sort of engenders or legitimizes or makes a particular kind of, like, set of interactions like seem natural or normal, that sort of, like, uphold the logic of the text. And then the third one is the core material element. What is the fundamental critical thing that makes the culture and subsequently the symbolic interaction intelligible? You know, like why does, like, something have to exist in a very specific material way to underpin the fundamental, like, cultural element? So an example we can say is, like, why does patriarchy have to exist in a fantasy setting? It doesn't have to, you know? It doesn't have to.
Yeah.
But why does it exist? And then somebody says, oh, well, that's because men, physically on average, are stronger than women. You know, they say that, and then you say, well, no, it doesn't have to be. It's a fantasy setting. Magic can exist.
Yeah.
It can equalize. So the conception of patriarchy is fundamentally underheld by a representation based upon a material condition. So, but, like, I feel like there's a challenge here in that people are still so firmly focused upon that top first initial horizon, and then, like, they're just running it with it that way. And then when you sort of get into sort of lower levels of, like, the over-deterministic meaning-making tendrils that sort of comprise of the symptomatic form that is the text, it's really difficult to have these conversations because we're getting into, like, you're overthinking it territory, you know? But, like, that's, I don't know. I've read books about narrative analysis. It makes sense to me that this would be the approach that you would.
Sure. Yeah. Well, yes. I guess that's the other thing with this is, like, if you are digging your heels in the sand and saying that Mushoku Tensei is a moral story, and that the people who like it or the people who like or identify with, like, Rudius in any way are bad people, yeah, you're probably not going to give a shit about any of that, honestly. Yeah.
Just as a disclaimer, Beatrice, in case you were watching this, I'm trying to present, like, this argument in good faith, right? I'm earnestly trying to. I'm not trying to, like, straw man or, like, misrepresent. So if I am in some way misrepresenting kind of where you're coming from, I apologize. Like, that's not the intent. I'm actually we're trying to engage with it. That just wanted to throw that out there because I am starting to, like, speak for her in a way because we're not playing the clips and I'm kind of just trying to translate what I understand.
Sure.
So
yeah. I mean, I can play the clips if you
that.
want. You know, I can stop subjecting people to my dog shit Stellaris gameplay.
I don't
know much about Mushoku Tensei in general. I'm just here for the narrative analysis.
Well, you're here to really show Leadale. All right, guys. If you, go watch Leadale, guys.
Leadale,
let's go.
Woo!
Woo.
I think this whole conversation
we have to kill
is
everybody on AniList that gave Leadale a bad
No,
review.
don't say that.
We have to suicide everybody on AniList that gave Leadale a bad review.
Well, I think this whole kind of conversation we're having, to me, is kind of why it just, like, why media that kind of explores these topics kind of has justification in existing. Obviously, if these kind of elements weren't presented in the way that Mushoku Tensei kind of presents them, and it was kind of more genuinely engaging, which I do have a hesitancy to like try to police like creativity, right? Obviously, a lot of creativity is just a form of expression and exploration of like oneself, and you're being able to like present oneself in some fractal kind of way to other people, and then allow them to kind of engage in your work and view the world and bits of themselves through this like fractal kaleidoscope, and then it kind of starts these kind of conversations, right? To me, that's what justifies like these shows' existence, like the text engaging with these things, even if it's not necessarily in the most optimal way. There's definitely like, for all what we're saying, nobody is going to say like you have to like Mushoku Tensei, right?
Yeah.
You can find all these things problematic and not want to engage with it on this level. That is completely fair, right?
Yeah, I think the main thing that I'm getting from Ghost Mumi, is that you want to be able to engage with this narrative on a level beyond simply saying it's bad because of a moralistic element of it. You know, because like I see that a lot, even in general, not just to Mushoku Tensei, but like in general, because like it very often becomes a sort of a thought terminating statement. You know, it's just like they haven't done this thing. That's it's a concept you're going to see a lot. It's a concept that you're going to see a lot with the emergence of like new historicist narrative criticisms by Eve Sedgwick. Great feminist scholar. One of the things she talks about in Shame in the Cybernetic Fold, which is where it's coming from, is she talks about this idea that we tend to have to look at narratives in terms of like good dog, bad dog kind of narratives. This is doing good things in the right way. This is doing bad things in the right way, and it is us to sort of like steer narratives in a very specific way. It is us to steer a text because, you know, the text is supposed to be this distant yet immutable frame that emerges out of the human spirit, that we have to steer it in a particular way because that starts to implicate us as people, as moral subjects in relation to the text we generate. So if we don't, you know, put the line in the sand on the slavery thing, you know, this essentially is a sort of this great failure, right? And Sedgwick is essentially saying, well, that's not a particularly productive line of thought when it comes to navigating what are oftentimes texts that are as a result of, so in psychoanalysis it's called overdeterministic, right, where you have a whole bunch of causal elements that sort of like mesh together like roots of a tree to form the actual symptomatic tree itself. But she's essentially saying that like we shouldn't push it in that direction, because texts are products of systems and cultures and interactions that sort of steer writers and creators in very specific ways that at any given moment is not clear at all. So it's kind of dicey, I think. It's also very unproductive.
Yeah.
What?
If we want to, if we want to engage with the more in the Rudy's being a bad person thing, the next thing they kind of complain about in the clip is Rudy's
Where's
kind
the
of
gun? He hasn't made
what?
a gun yet, dude. That's the end result of every isekai protag. They make a gun.
They make a gun.
That's why Smartphone was ahead of its time. He made the gun in like episode 3. He's like, I have a gun.
Oh, I got a good video to put on. Hold on.
When did they do that in Bookworm? What volume is that where she pulls out a gun?
Here we go.
She pulls out the manual on how to make a gun first.
Here's Hmong primitive gun.
You know, the interesting thing about this, right? You know, you might you might not know this movie. I know you know this, Ghost. But that Hmong will never fire that gun at a member of his own tribe.
No. God damn it. God damn it. It all just comes back to Gran Torino, doesn't it?
God damn it. So if we want to talk about we're not gonna get copyright claim for this fucking video, are we?
No, probably not.
This dude just like finds this clip. He's like, God damn it. They stole my video.
So my gun making vid.
The next kind of thing that they talk about as far as like Rudy being a piece of shit, right, is the way he kind of does. They handle like sexual harassment, right? Because then the following episode after this one, they have like an interesting kind of thing about his idolization of Roxy, where these two characters break this figure of Roxy he made, not knowing he made it and not knowing he had any relation to it. They broke because Zenoba had it. They break the figure, and so he's like, this is literally an epoch to my religion of worshiping Roxy. Which I guess is a tangent. I kind of want to talk about. That's interesting to me because it kind of shows like you can tell I like this show. I guess on some level, it's interesting to me because it shows kind of how he like interacted and like interfaced with like his one-sided crushes, I guess, in his previous life, right? Like it's reflective of like waifuism. That he has like a quote unquote like waifu shrine, like the panties are in like a literal shrine. He has a figure of her. Like these are ways that he kind of learned to like interact with, you know, his affections for somebody in his previous life, and so they're kind of manifesting in these ways in this life, and it almost kind of starts acting as like a quasi kind of commentary on like idol worship and like more primitive cultures, I guess. Because like I mean, so Roxy's panties have essentially evolved for him. We're just like getting off on a big tangent.
They are a quite literal fetish.
Well, they are a fetish, right? But they've evolved from this point because like he's not engaging with the panties as like a fetish object anymore. They have evolved to the idol. Like he is leaning on them for like support. Like they are like essentially a representation of like his, you know, his teacher. Yeah. So he's essentially engaging in idol worship at this point. It kind of is an interesting
what a compromised creature, man.
What?
What a compromised creature.
He is a very compromised creature.
Not like me.
We'll get to that.
I mean, you know, as an atheist, I have an IQ of 300.
That's true.
I watched Rick and Morty.
Little known fact, Joe was actually part of the Amazing Atheist crew back in the early 2010s.
Right. And Joe is a card-carrying Mensa member.
I was, you know that video where he poured hot oil all over his genitals? I was the editor.
Oh, and the banana too.
Yeah, I was the editor.
Damn, we're getting some deep lore in this.
Put on my resume.
What the fuck?
Yes,
I was the editor for the Amazing Atheist. In case anyone, I don't know if that would be a joke that would like. I feel like that would be a joke that would not.
I have no idea what the fuck you are talking about right now.
It's like you mentioning that would be like the same kind of reveal as you saying I worked on Avatar.
Yes, Rudy is a very compromised individual. Like these are supposed to. He's very much supposed to be that. So it's always interesting when like the power fantasy thing comes up because it's like, in a way, yes, he's been very like the world is very much facilitating for him to like be able to do these great things, but I don't know if somebody would really want to be Rudy like as a person, like maybe situationally, like oh yeah, sure, be born in another world, have fucking magic or whatever. but being this fucking like socially unhinged, probably not.
So I feel like this is something where like
I would make you, fuck Roxy, fuck Harris. No, I would make Ghislaine my wife.
So the thing is, like, I don't want to make claims about like who should or should not like be analyzing a text or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to stress though that like I wonder how many critics sort of inject themselves or inject some reflection of themselves into this narrative in a way that I'm not sure is commensurate with how the story is. Because like you're gonna see this a lot in like Zanma, right? Like Zanma is like they go full hard on revenge, like horde.
Sure.
And it's like they do a lot of real shit things. And the whole element is just like, well, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, like I wouldn't do that. So like arguing on the like being like, bro, it's crazy. Like for one of the webtoons I'm reading right now is called Nano Machine, and like anybody who comes across him and like looks at him wrong, he literally just cuts off their arm, like without fail.
That's awesome.
He literally just cuts off their arm. And this is like it's like a martial arts like it's a martial arts like manhwa where it's set in like ancient China, but everybody's got a Korean name, you know?
Yeah.
And the main character is someone who is like the failed son. He's a failed son, right?
Yeah.
He's a failed son, but his descendant from like a gajillion years in the future comes back in time and like implants a super futuristic nano machine, like Metal Gear Solid style nano machine thing into his body. And that just makes him like overpowered.
What?
And the entire story is him just getting revenge on everybody who's wronged him. And then, you know, and the thing is that like none of that is resolved in any particular way, because who would have thought that meting out violence just creates more violence? So he just goes on a rampage the entire time, and he just cuts people's arms off left and right. There's literally a wiki on the Nano Machine wiki. There is literally a page devoted to, and I quote, notable dismemberments.
That's awesome.
Oh my god.
Notable dismemberments.
Yeah.
But like, I never want to be that guy.
No, yeah. It's like, yeah. I mean, there are
Bro,
many.
love the Christmas contest, free with ads. Pull that up.
Oh god damn. Yeah, well, there are many characters in media that I like to. I like to watch. I like American Psycho. I like to watch Patrick Bateman run around. I don't want to be Patrick Bateman. I feel like that should go without saying.
Yeah, I think part of the interesting element is seeing how they navigate these situations.
Right. Yeah.
Are they going to screw up? You know, how do they fix it?
Is he going to kill that woman this time?
The answer is
that
yes.
dog next to him. Are they going to survive this scene? I guess we'll find out.
So going back from our tangent,
I don't
the criticism for the following episode is like he ties up the girls that destroyed his Roxy figure, and he's like trying to figure out how to like punish them. And in this like moment of like he's tied them up, quote unquote, asserted his dominance by like beating them in a fight, knocked them out. They've been tied up and gagged or whatever. And like in this position of like power, he is like, I wonder if this would solve my erectile dysfunction, and just like sexually assaults one by grabbing, like fondling their chest, and then is like, nope, nothing, and then just like kind of goes on nonchalantly. The criticism again is like, this character is supposed to be evolving, and then he takes like this massive step back with the slave thing, and then in the following episode just casually sexually assaults somebody. And so
that's so weird, because again, it's like, why are you assuming like how he's supposed to evolve? Like, how he's supposed to become better? Like, because it's never said that he's going to become a good person. You know, like it never outlined this like path where he's going to become like a good God-fearing citizen, you know, or some shit. Like that's not the point.
So it's interesting to me in that sense, because like their general argument is it's spending a lot of time with this character who is supposedly going to be becoming a better person. Of course, they're kind of focusing on the semantics of better being like morally better, right? A good moral person. What in the fuck are you doing right now? It's not even okay. So you're spending a lot of time with this person who is being a complete piece of shit. And there's not like whenever it seems like there's progress, it takes like 2 steps back, right? To me, it's interesting because like it kind of addresses that in a way. I kind of forgot about this a little bit because it's been 7 weeks, I guess, since the first few episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But when we were rewatching it with Sai trying to catch up,
it
reminded me, the beginning arc. Like the beginning, so the end of the last season is essentially him kind of starting to get over a breakup, right? He finally had been able to emotionally open himself up to somebody and connect with someone in this world in a more intimate way than he had ever been able to achieve in his previous life. And since he had gamified this world so much, the way he interfaced with the world, he had believed that he had done everything right in this like romance, right? Like he had hit every romance flag. He got the good end. He slept with her. All sunshines and rainbows from here. And to him, in his perspective, it did work out. Like he has no idea what he did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
She just up and left, disappeared with no explanation, and he was left high and dry. Fucking Radiohead fucking shit I made here.
Yeah.
So that's the end of the first season. He's essentially just getting to that initial stage of like getting out of bed, because like the initial kind of heartbreak is like debilitating, and he has just gotten out of bed and is like, okay, I'm going to continue forward. And that's him essentially coming from the lowest place in his life since him being humiliated back in high school in his previous life.
It's a second trauma, really.
Yes, like arguably potentially even greater, because it was like such an intimate thing, right? Like he opened himself up. Yes. But this is him showing growth because he has actively been able to pass that point, like without the safety nets he had before, right? He doesn't have a loving, caring home that will, kind of enable his terrible behavior. Sorry. He doesn't have that safety net anymore. He has to work for himself, and even so, he is able to overcome this, this blow, and choose to like continue moving forward. And you see that directly in the visuals. Like it shows him passing his previous self. Like that's him taking that step to finally becoming a better person than he was before in his previous life.
Mm-hmm.
So this season, right? This season starts off with him kind of just going through the motions in a way, just kind of forcing himself forward. And he hasn't really addressed any of the trauma yet. He hasn't worked through any of his feelings. He hasn't explored that part of himself yet. And so he's putting on this like facade of like, when you kind of go through a breakup, you're like, okay, I'm gonna become like the best person I can be. So he's putting on that mask, right? He's being a better person. And that's what the whole kind of first part of this arc is him dealing with the breakup and like being somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's like, that's why he doesn't get along with the Paul want to be, right? Because he recognizes that he's not being himself, and they all kind of can see that, he's not being himself. He's just smiling for the sake of it. This is kind of the text's way of like addressing this. Like, this is what you kind of want him to be, right? This is him being a better person. He's not being confrontational. He's trying to be accommodating. This is him being a better person. But it's not who he is, right? He still needs to work through the traumas of what he's gone through and work on himself, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of where the breakdown happens. He that's why he is not able to connect with Sarah, right? He literally is not able to connect his ego and his id again and become intimate with her because he cannot open himself up again. He hasn't addressed the trauma that he incurred from the breakup with Eris, and it ends up leading to more trauma in a way, right? Like he literally just kind of went through a breakup with a girl similar to Sarah, and now he's unable to perform with her, and she takes, like, understandably, she takes it very personally, and is like, oh, there must be something wrong with me, and so she like throws it in his face. He's not in a situation where he can be like understood at that moment, and so it kind of just ends up exasperating things. And so
which almost makes a lot more sense in a world without like medical knowledge, without like extensive medical knowledge. Like erectile dysfunction wouldn't really be like as logical of a thing for like normal people now, right?
You just get some Blue Chew, man.
That's literally what I said. Literally what I said is he's not listening to Come Town.
Yeah. BlueChew.com.
Well, it's actually because they actually kind of show that in the text, right? Because like he talks to Paul 2.0, whatever. I can't fucking remember his name.
I don't remember. Yeah.
He just is like
Paul.
He's kind of just like, oh, maybe you just did something wrong, because like whenever I can't get it up, and perform, sometimes I just fucked up something in the foreplay, and so maybe if we get a professional, and like does this very toxic masculine thing, right? But that kind of just shows like that kind of
homie, you just gotta get a different bitch. Like,
like, this is literally an analog. This is literally an analog for him going through his like Andrew Tate like Manosphere arc, right? This is the person who has been broken up with and is like trying to find themselves again and like define who they are, and is like reading these pickup artist books, right? Like he's engaging with these toxic masculine kind of things, and while it's not necessarily good, it can be rehabilitative on some level for him and kind of maybe get him to a point that he needs to get to. Like because him not getting along with this Paul 2.0 character is him directly rejecting parts of himself. Like you can't really connect with other people. Like, this is my interpretation of the text, right? You can't really connect with other people without fully kind of understanding yourself. And Rudy was in a place where he felt that way, and then was, the rug was pulled from underneath him, and so he is like, well, shit, I don't know myself like I thought I did. And so this is him questioning his entire identity, and so he's having to like engage with these different systems and different like viewpoints to try and find himself again. So he's engaging with these toxic masculine trait, like, kind of ways of going about things, like, him kind of getting with the quote unquote prostitute, whatever, is almost like I guess like whatever time period this would be, like it's equivalent of like, hey, the only way you can get over your girl is if you get under another, am I right, bro? Like it's that kind of mentality. This is very much like him kind of working through those things in his own way. And then you also have like that layer of like, this is almost like a restart for him, right? This is him not necessarily getting a chance, but this is like him. He's had a set, and he's kind of having to start from zero in a way. So this first arc is like him engaging with Paul again. Like when he was reincarnated in the other world, Paul was like a foil to himself and like his previous self.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of engaged with them and learned from them and grew. This is him doing that again. Then he goes to the school, and that's also supposed to be like him finally being able to work through the traumas that he incurred when he was in school before with like bullying and stuff like that, where he's actively engaging in bullying, right? Like he's like, sorry, that sounded weird. He's engaging with like opposing bullying.
Yeah.
Where like he has now been facilitated with like the power fantasy shit, where
Like
he's like
saves Cliff and
yeah, like he's able to stand up for people and not be fucking completely traumatized and humiliated.
Yeah.
This is him going through that. This is also kind of him repeating the steps with Sylphie when he was able to finally leave his house and got over the trauma of not being able to leave his house.
Yes.
This is directly paralleling that in the first season.
Mm-hmm.
So all this, like, because like this is leading into the other criticism of like a lot of people are saying this is all very boring. They've lost the plot. Like it was this nice serial kind of adventure story.
Bro, I don't know how anyone can say this shit's fucking boring, bro. Do you see the fucking buff ass dude that called himself Demon King?
Demon King? That was that was
fun as shit.
That was fucking funny.
Yeah.
And now he's their teacher.
What the fuck is boring here? All right. What the fuck?
But you know that's their perspective, right? They're saying like all this like, which you know I kind of outlined earlier. Beatrice was pretty upfront in saying she didn't like the show until it kind of started focusing more on like the action with like the demon continent stuff. And so now that it's gone back to focusing on Rudy as like a character study, she's not engaging with it because she doesn't like Rudy as a character. I imagine that's probably not a isolated case, right? A lot of these people probably don't like Rudy, so they're not engaging with him on this level. And so they're not engaging with they're not as engaged or entertained with these kind of plot points. Like, I mean, we just talked about it for like I guess I monologued about it for like 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
They're not engaging with it on that level, it would seem. Like they're not getting that out of it. They're just like, bro, he was supposed to be like rescuing his mom. Like, what the fuck? Like, why did he just leave his mom fucking wherever the fuck she was? I mean, he just forgot everything. Now he's like fucking around in this school. This is fucking stupid. Like that's kind of where they're at.
He doesn't have to rescue his mom. Xena's a strong woman. She can take care of herself. What are you, sexist? You saying women can't take care of themselves?
Hey, Joe. You know what I always say? I always say women are assets. You know what I mean?
Oh my god!
Why did you say it like that? Go on. Explain.
What do you mean?
The way you said the word assets.
Yeah, because that's what they are. They're assets.
Please expand further.
What?
Anyhow,
you don't think women can help create a productive workforce? You know?
Why do you keep saying these things like this? It's almost as if you're implying something.
I don't really know. I think you're just not open to the idea that women are powerful.
So I wanted to ask you to stop being problematic on stream. Okay?
Well, so
yeah, oh god,
it's like it's objectifying, but it's not.
It's just like. There's nothing wrong in the way what you said, but just the way you said it, as if there is.
Well, so I guess
oh yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, okay. Well, I was gonna say, based upon the description you have here, do we even have to see it? Do we even have to see the literal details? Because when we go back to experiences and simulations of experiences, you can probably make an argument that this particular set of events is reflective of, say, just any kind of major development in life in which major setbacks have occurred. You know?
Yeah.
Like the idea that, like, you know, like him losing his virginity and then she dips. Him him losing his virginity, and then she dips, and then like that sort of like gets internalized as like a sort of an issue that he has to like figure out a way to like sort of navigate, and then people are giving him terrible advice. You can apply that to like a lot of facets in life, you know.
Yeah.
Like for instance, like I recently lost my job, and
I recently lost my virginity.
I was like, whoa, whoa.
No, but like I recently like lost my job, and it was like meant to be like the beginning of like a long-term career, and like now I have to like reset from zero again, you know. And so like what comes out of that is like a lot of people, despite being well-meaning, are giving absolutely non-productive advice. And so like there's a lot of sort of similarities on an experiential level. One example, I think, in case if anybody is unclear, one example that I think sort of exemplifies this is something like, say, like One Punch Man being a discussion about salarymen and working in a corporate system. It never outrightly says, you know, Saitama is a salary man, but like the conventions and the experiences are mapped out in such a way which makes it commensurate with that particular idea. Or like how, you know, in my opinion, Death Note is a discussion about neoliberal competition, but everybody's so hung up on like it as a morality story.
Right, yeah.
You know, so like
which is conveniently forgotten by most people because they don't really consider it in terms of like the context of the 2000s in Japan.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, you know, people don't read academic articles because that shit's for nerds, dog.
Nerd.
Dorks read that.
Hey, why are your eyes closed when you talk?
Well, it makes them look more pretentious.
That's right.
Oh.
What do you mean my eyes are closed?
yeah, Gil.
You can open this whole time, bro.
You know what you should do? You should have like whatever your eyes.
All right, on this channel we keep our eyes open. Why? We're woke. All right, we're woke at all times. Look at this. Look at this man's eyes on stream right now. His eyes are wide open.
So you should change your like your little PNG guy whenever you talk to like when your eyes are closed and your mouth's open. You should have like a finger raised up, and it would capture the effect.
Oh, of course, yeah.
One finger is like
spammed with the nerd.
Yeah,
emoji.
that would really work out when I'm streaming with Sonic. And he messes up in Persona 4 when I got my finger up all smugly. It's like, bro, it's because it's because your character is not leveled high enough.
Oh god.
Smug finger.
So, I guess that kind of is going to lead into kind of where I kind of want to like, because this has been very general, right? Again, this isn't like a specific to.
We're
Beatrice,
3 hours in.
We're 3 hours in. This isn't specific to Beatrice. Like a lot of people kind of had these kind of thoughts. So these were kind of things we wanted to talk about and like kind of justify in a way, right? We're not going to justify like their actions or like this isn't like slavery is actually good in this story. Like it's just more like these are why they kind of exist and why they have kind of a right to exist in a narrative and what you kind of take away from it kind of thing, right? So it hasn't been like directed toward the video specifically, but I guess like the thing to like kind of I want to end off of that's like more critical of the video specifically. It's again, like we said, it is completely fine to not want to engage with Mushoku Tensei or any show on any level that you don't want to engage with it in. If you just find elements of it like problematic, or like even if it's not even problematic, like you just don't care for it, right?
You don't have an interest in it, and you don't like it. Now you don't have to engage with it on this level. This isn't like us advocating like you have to view Mushoku Tensei in this way, right? This is just our perspective.
This is what we get out of it.
Yeah. You can get completely someone else that likes the show can get something completely different out of it. This is just us.
Yeah.
That being said,
I will
ahead,
always lean towards what I believe to be the most interesting analysis.
Yeah, like
That
you
is
just
my
want to
approach to something.
You want to
And
get like the
recommend
most out of
Leadale.
your experience. Yeah.
Yes. Watch
Dude,
Leadale. Have you guys heard of Leadale?
awesome.
Guys, Leadale, all right?
Yo, Leadale's awesome.
Let me go back here. Fuck this.
can you-
That Leadale, guys?
Dude,
Have you guys
look
heard
at
of
these
Leadale?
mouth breathers on Anilas, bro.
Just
Oh
saying
my
shit, saying shit like bog standard isekai full of recycled.
Bro, Jesus.
It's very, very
Christ.
average.
Generic,
Generic,
uninteresting, and
uninteresting.
uninspired.
Guys.
I wouldn't spend the time to watch it. Find a better isekai to watch. Who's this person? Send me their
Where-
geocache.
Yeah, what is their
people.
address?
Send me their address. Chat, you know what to do.
No, don't,
Chat,
don't,
dox
no. This is no. Don't do that. Don't do that. That is morally
Why
repugnant.
not? I have a box of anthrax.
I would
This
just
is-
like to
you
say
can
that
do- you
Joe
can
is
do
not
that-
a part of the
Box of
weed crew.
Yeah,
You
this
don't
is not.
endorse anything
Yeah,
he says.
you could do that on
Bro,
your
I
own
got-
channel.
Dude, I bought anthrax off Kijiji, man. It's just in my house. Not doing anything, bro.
Find this man at
But
Pause
I'll
Select.
see you.
He's not a part of the weed crew.
I need to use this.
I need like a thing where I can just like shut the stream off. It's like beep. Boom, boom.
No, okay. The thing I want to directly kind of criticize the video for is it is completely fine to not want to engage with the work this way. It is incredibly unproductive to make like a video like they have that's not engaging with the work. Mind you, there's nothing wrong with like saying like, oh, I don't like this show or whatever. I'm not saying you can't criticize a show. They get very personal in this though. Where like they're directly kind of like calling out people who identify with Rudy, and it's like I don't know if you want to play the clip.
You're gonna have to give me like a timestamp.
I have it linked somewhere. Just because I want there is like an interpretation there, right? I don't want to misrepresent what's said, because some people have kind of said like, oh well, they're directly kind of referencing people who. Oh, go ahead.
Well, that kind of boils back again, right, to a sort of disconnect between like the experience of a text versus the literal elements of a text. When somebody says they like they sympathize or commiserate with like Rudy, it doesn't necessarily mean that they say, no, Rudy's got a point about the slavery thing, or like or any of that particular thing. It's that what I think what they generally mean is that they are this piece of media has generated a specific kind of experience that they feel as if reflects a particular element of a human condition. The details are kind of secondary to this. People can say, well, you know, the details, people might, for instance, say that like, well, the detail, you know, the devil's in the details. You gotta have to like focus on the details itself, because you know they inform these experience. But the way in which these details are informed happen at the level of the person, like sort of engaging with them. You know, at the end of the day, once again, Halloween is not a queer film, but it is a queer film. I don't know how often I can stress that. The experience is what dictates the relationship between an audience and its text. And so this is, again, to fall back on narrative theories that people generally don't read. This falls back to Stuart Hall's like model of like encoding and decoding, where Hall is essentially saying that like, so generally in a text, what a text means is navigated or is negotiated actually on three meaningful levels: the creator / broadcaster or sender, the intermediary or the platform, or you know, the media space, the media technology, and then the audience or the receiver. At each stage there is a process of negotiation. The author tries to impute something. The platform or the media technology shapes the thing. The audience and the receiver uses the language that they have. And language here is being used in a basic Saussurean sense, the fundamental intelligible unit of communication within a culture. They negotiate what they got through the first 2 levels, and then they sort of ingest and interpret it in a specific way. And so as a result, a text is at its core a generator of an experience. But what that experience generates is going to be very fundamentally different from person to person. Now, this does not mean that there is some sort of quasi, Pinkerian, postmodern, nihilistic, that means any meaning goes kind of thing. What it means is that what is important is that the discussion occurs at the level of experience, that we know that experience is how people engage with a particular text. And so you can sort of have to trace it back through those particular things. So when somebody says, I see a lot of myself in Rudy, you kind of have to suss out at its core, what about his condition as a human, as a person within a specific set of circumstances, do you see yourself in? It's not, oh man, I wish I could have groomed a child or something. No, they could be talking about like a similar sense of atomization. They can be talking about senses of regret. They could be talking about like a personal sense of failure. I don't know what it means. It really depends upon what they mean when they express these particular things, because people interpret and negotiate things very differently based upon, whatever it is going to stick out to them. It's the Wittgensteinian duck-rabbit diagram. Some people are going to see a duck, some people are going to see a rabbit, and you can't shit on the rabbit people because you only see the duck.
Right.
So I linked the rant.
Right.
Watch Leadale.
So
Watch Leadale. All right, here we go.
So the same person who said it's not a redemption arc is arguing that it is a redemption arc, or that it is not a redemption arc. When people characterize this show as a redemption arc, they always point to the subtitle at the end of episode 1 where Rudius almost says it as verbatim proof. But people are misunderstanding the implications of get serious about living. No,
Hold on, he continues. He doesn't mean living to mean get a job, become a salaryman, be an adult, and make Abe proud.
He couldn't do any of that.
All the normies who say it, that this time around he's going to touch grass, that's it. Yeah, he's not...
So, hey, spoiler alert for all of you dumbass fuckheads who spend all of your time watching anime and not going outside. Most of life, you should just go outside and touch grass. Enjoy your life. It's not all cartoons. And, I'm sorry for calling anime cartoons. I know that's kind of a controversial thing to do.
Not really.
But they are cartoons. You're wasting your life. As much as you'd be wasting your life just sitting around watching Family Guy all of the goddamn time. Go outside. Do things. Meet people. Stop sitting around and identifying with fucking Rudius.
If you identify with Rudius, you need help that this show can't give you, is the problem. It's written by somebody who is Rudius, trying to write their way out of being Rudius without knowing how you would do that.
That's a fucking claim.
Like,
don't claim that. Don't claim the author is the same.
It's an issue of if this show was...
No, you can stop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, that's a lot, isn't it?
I want to say, as someone, okay, so this might be, I'm not gonna get like too much of the details, right? But like, watching Mushoku Tensei over the last few weeks, because I have been improving myself in multiple ways over the last few weeks as well, right? Like in the last 2 months.
Yeah, this man been benching 300.
Yeah. No, but I kind of relate to like seeing Rudy try to like improve his condition, even if it's not like super meaningful or whatever, right?
Sure.
No, I mean, I'm similar to what you're doing.
It's not particularly, right? But like I started this year in a car crash. It really sucked. I'm still dealing with the consequences of it, and it's one of those things where like I'm now in my life in the latter half of this year trying to improve both myself and my life, right? Both mentally, my mental health and my physical health, right? So like I relate to the fact that like, Rudy is trying to improve himself in any sort of way, right? I really dislike that kind of like thing, get help kind of bullshit. Like, no, the point is that Rudy is a person who couldn't get help to begin with, right?
Or maybe he could, like, maybe he could, but he just didn't know the avenues or have the support to be able to like find those avenues. He
couldn't like conveniently get help or couldn't practically get help rather, right? So like that's kind of the thing. It's like this in this case, it's like no, the sort of like, oh, he's just like me for real or whatever kind of perspective again is someone who, if you are struggling, which could be anything, you might relate to a character who's struggling too, right?
That I don't know. It gets to the core of what this show is. Like, it's literally Rudy's second chance at life, right?
Yeah.
He essentially kind of, I mean, I don't want to word it that way because it's implying something a little negative, but he kind of squandered one life in a way, and this is his second chance of being able to rehabilitate his traumas, build the life he kind of wants. It's not necessarily like a moral story, right?
Yeah.
I don't think there's a problem with people seeing parts of themselves reflected in Rudy. That doesn't imply you think that you're literally Rudy, right? You're not like, I'm gonna go bundle some titties, or
he's literally me.
Yeah, like just because you
like maybe a 14-year-old does that. I don't know. Like
I don't.
Otaku don't do that. Otaku are really good at separating fiction from reality.
Yeah, like I don't know who this is addressing. Like
I don't know.
This is a very like old argument, right? Like,
yeah.
This has been going on for 20-something years about otaku, not being able to discern fiction from reality or whatever. And it's been very blatant that there's a clear distinction in fiction and reality for otaku. There's not really been a question of that.
It kind of reminds me of the old like sort of are you guys familiar with like the dialogue around like anikura?
Anikura?
Not. I can't
it's
say
just a Japanese slang term for anime clubs.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Because like for a very long time, right? Like dialogue around like otaku like sociality and like sociality around like people who are like really into like anime and manga has been like they're losers because like they don't like go out and touch grass, right? They don't go out, they don't talk, and all that kind of stuff. But it turns out that like a lot of the ways in which these have been studied has been like along the lines of very specifically measuring sociality in ways that we oftentimes deem as like markers of sociality. But the reason why it's called like anikura discussions is that like, well, it turns out they're very social. They go to clubs, they go to anime clubs. They go to clubs and hang out and then talk about I don't know how cute Roxy is. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like they do things. It's just that like
they do insider trading actually.
Exactly. But like we don't see it as like it's a very sort of like hegemonic argument. The idea of like don't get so fussed up over cartoons. Just go out and touch grass. It's just cartoons. I really want to say I don't know if that's really a great argument when you're literally making an income talking about cartoons. But the main thing,
kind of the wrong channel to say it on.
Yeah, if this was like a blacksmithing channel and there's like fuck cartoons, I'm like, well, these guys are just really into blacksmithing. All right, I understand that.
Yeah.
It's like, look, all right, these are not anime people. I get it.
No shade to my girl Beatrice, but like, come on, dog.
Like Beatrice,
you made like all your money since like the days of Target off of anime.
It doesn't seem like
My Little Pony. Like I don't.
it doesn't seem like this is like really something Beatrice is pushing. It seems to be something Bird's saying, right?
Yeah.
Sure, but I feel like she should have fucking responded a little differently.
You gotta rein your boy in.
You gotta raise your voice, yeah.
You gotta rein your boy in, man.
Well, she kind of like chimed in at the end and was like, you know, if you identify with Rudy as, you know, you need help that we can't give you, kind of thing, right? Like, so she's not necessarily.
To be fair, though, that's kind of like.
Oh, it's kind of the same thing, though.
That's kind of like not rocking the boat with the co-host kind of thing, right? You know, if like look at it this way, if Sonic was just like, Puerto Rico should not be a U.S. colony, I'd be like, that's true, and he's like, and they should also remove all immigrants from the island. I'd be like, that's an argument.
I mean, I can identify with this because, you know, my co-host here was dropping all kinds of bombs, throwing all kinds of shade at some random people. I didn't quite realize. I was like, bro, what the fuck, man?
I just see that as good co-host, you know, not rocking the boat. You know, that's co-host solidarity. I'm trying to remove as much blame from Beatrice as much as possible.
All right, listen,
so he doesn't unfollow me on Twitter.
Listen, Moomy, all right, you and I, we are legally wedded to one another. We cannot testify against each other in court.
That's true. It's like this Better Call scene.
Talking about slavery, the institution of marriage.
I am understanding of, like, you know, this is
true. The institution made, yeah, absolutely.
Marriage was historically an institution that just made women slaves.
Yep.
Oh, goddamn.
Okay, well, who's the slave here, Moomy? You or me?
I mean, who's the Jamie pulling up the clips here? Come on.
Yep, that's it. I'm.
Zai's also younger.
I was groomed.
You were groomed.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
But no, like, you know, there is an argument to be made that, you know, this is them streaming. You know, it's not a structured, mediated, scripted video where they're like kind of going over their stuff. It is very possible they're just trying to convey, like, if you think you are Rudy, you need help, kind of thing, like, specifically. But the way it comes off is like them shouting down people who, you know, identify with aspects of Rudy and enjoy this show specifically. Because, like, you know,
I think it boils down to, like, what about Rudy do you identify with, right? Like, that's the core question, right? Like, there's a lot about Rudy that I feel like most people can identify with if you approach it very abstractly. Like, Rudy is very much a character built upon, like, regret, uncertainty, precarity, fear of being, like, left behind. And so, like, I don't know. Those seem like very real, like, and, like, the thing here is that, like, Rudy is a character. Rudy is a character with a lot of very human concerns in a genre that works quite a lot to sort of temper them. Because not a lot of isekai protags are like, they don't go through the kinds of existential crises that, like, Rudy generally does. Despite whatever of him being a good or a bad person, like, I can understand why somebody would sympathize with parts of Rudy.
Like that, like, that's, to me, like, that's what makes the show kind of meaningful in a way, is that Rudy is this flawed character.
Yeah.
And he, like, if he did kind of continue his trajectory from, like, the first few episodes of season 2, yes, he would be a quote unquote better person, and I can see that he would be, you know, more likable or more copacetic or identifiable for, like, these people who do take issue with him. But I think it's the fact that he is such a flawed person that is still striving to, like, better themselves in any, you know, kind of even a medial way, right? Like, a lot of the focus of the season is, like, just him doing workout routines. Like, it's just him kind of just working on himself. It's the fact that he is such, like, a flawed person and still, like, finding the way, like, the motivation to better himself that's makes it more meaningful.
It kind of reminds me of Overlord, because Overlord has a very large and devoted fan base. Where up in they call Einzelkun Bone Daddy. But one of the interesting things about Overlord, right, is that like in the 4th season, he starts to go to war. You know, the man starts to cook. And there's a very poignant scene where
my man's cooking.
The noble of the place he's invading, because like the thing about like Ainz is that like, so the protagonist's name is Ainz, and he's got like, so the whole idea of Overlord is that the main character is a Japanese salaryman who gets sent into another world, but as like his game character, and he runs like a separate space called Nazarick, and Nazarick is just full of like NPCs that are formerly just like NPC, like mercenary kind of like characters, who are now given sapience, and they all follow him, right? They all follow him because like he's the only human left from the game that like still like continues to be there, so they worship him as a god. So there's this sort of weird comedic element to Overlord where he will say very mundane things and then they will misinterpret it as him wanting to go on a warpath. And so there's like, so we gotta go to war. We gotta go to war.
Yeah.
You know?
The NPCs are constantly trying to like 4D chess, like predict what he's saying, and usually it's not that complicated, but they assume it is.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's like stuff where he'll like look out like at a plane or something and he'll be like, wow, so beautiful. And they'll be like, so you want it. But one of the things that's really important, right, is that like part of Ainz's character is that these NPCs he sees as his children in a way, because they were created. So the game that he came from, you can create your own NPC. And so like the NPCs that remained were essentially the byproducts of his old guildmates who have like left him behind.
Yeah.
This is incredibly important because in the 4th season, he goes to war. And there's a part where a noble asks for parley. And so he sits down with Ainz. This noble sits down with Ainz and says, is there any way, because he goes on a warpath and like he just rocks the shit out of everyone. Like this is,
he just fucking wins.
There is no concept of difficulty in this story, you know, like he fucks with everyone. And so like this noble says like
they are weaker.
Yeah. And so like this noble says like, is there anything we can do? Is there anything that we can do to avoid our own annihilation? And he says no. So Ainz says no. And then the noble says, then why are you doing this? And then Ainz says, well, why do you want to do the things you do? And then the noble says, well, I want to make my people happy. And Ainz says, well, I also want to make my people happy. But the way to make my people happy is they want blood. And so Ainz is essentially, and so Ainz says like, so when it comes to a situation of like, between making your citizens happy and making my people happy, I will choose my people every single time. And so in that sort of instance, Ainz is an interesting character because despite the massive amount of death he causes, there's a sort of very interesting core to his character that makes him in that moment very relatable by the sheer vulnerability he displays. Everything he's done has been absolutely like horrible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's tortured and killed and enslaved so many people out there. Like he has done way more damage than Rudy has.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, way more.
But he nevertheless, in that specific moment, and you can see based upon the Crunchyroll comments, all right, that like there's people engage with elements of a character in very specific ways in context, in sort of closed off as a sort of closed off interpretive hermeneutic topos, a sort of closed off space that then in that instance they feel, okay, there's something human about him. And so I think, I don't know, I feel like people I feel like that's how people generally engage with a lot of media in that way. You know, like instances, like snapshots of that kind of stuff. So like when somebody says like they feel some particular similarity with Rudy, like the core of the question is not to say like you shouldn't, but what do you feel? Like what's the snapshot that gives you that tang of sympathy?
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, I feel like media analysis is basically just like a giant conversation, right? We're just building on something that came before and exploring these ideas.
Sure.
Anybody kind of have like some last kind of thoughts they want to kind of tie up with?
No, we've been going for what, 3.5 hours now?
All right. I want to recommend a really good Isekai.
Is it Leadale?
It's called Leadale.
Leadale. Okay.
Yeah. So, the plot of Leadale is about a Japanese... What? Anyhow, the plot of Leadale is about a Japanese girl who is... she's frail, and so she spends most of her time in the hospital bed playing a VR game. And then one day, the game shuts down, she dies, and then she gets reincarnated into a fantasy world that is exactly like the VR game, but it is set many years into the future. The NPCs she has created have gone on to have their own lives, and most of the story is her going from place to place and then seeing like her NPC children and the lives they lead. And it's great.
NPCs for kids? Goddamn.
She made NPCs, yeah.
Are you saying they don't have inner monologues?
What?
What?
No, she made NPCs.
Oh, I thought
she made like NPCs.
They became people, like NPCs.
Yeah. Who then went on to vote for Joe Biden. Yeah, I understand.
And they had children of their own, so she's actually a grandmother.
Okay, I'm gonna harness my corny ass, cheesy, fucking emotional shit. Tie this all together.
Tie this into a noose.
Into a noose to end it all with, in a very video essay like way.
Well, cannot be tied in together because Leadale's a good show.
I'm gonna end us off with a quote from the kind of a problematic figure. Maybe I won't name them directly, but it's a very relevant one. Next time you get mad at a piece of media for existing or somebody for liking it, something that you think is bad, ask yourself, why would this make me angry? If you don't have the energy to engage in that conversation about the difference, about your differences, or try to come to an understanding, figure out first and foremost how you can get that energy. I think that's fundamentally at odds with like this idea of drawing cultural lines in the sand and rage baiting and engaging in very non-productive kind of discussions about things. But that's just me. That's one to talk about the show, defend some of it, kind of give warranted criticism where it was due.
This is a substitute for us talking about season 2 in a proper video.
Yeah, just watch this stream. This is us talking about season 2. We're probably not gonna. I mean, no, we're probably not gonna make a video on season 2.
Probably not.
We talked quite a bit about season 1 already. It might be interesting.
Maybe if it ends up, if we have something more we want to say, we might do a video when the second core airs and finishes. So
we can do a end of year wrap up and talk about it.
Yeah, when we do that, we'll probably talk about it.
I favor the villain. This is coming out.
But yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up there. Gil, Joe, thanks for coming on and shitting on stupid shit with us, I guess.
Yeah.
When's the check gonna arrive? You promised me money.
The contract said you weren't allowed to mention on stream.
You promised me the address of.
I didn't read it. I'm not a lawyer.
They think y'all joined the crew already. Okay, that's what it said in the thumbnails.
This is a crew.
This is a crew. Yeah.
Of what?
Weebs. Anyway.
What?
Podcast probably on Monday or Tuesday. Video maybe by then. I don't know.
Everyone who disagrees with us, that's listen to this. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening. If you join the stream,
if anybody has any shows that's like Leadale, let me know. I swear to God, dude, I'm fiending here.
Oh God! Thanks everyone for sticking around. Next stream we'll Probably be another AniTube audit. We'll see.
Tube audit.
Yay! All right.
Positivity.
Positivity.
That's not so bad.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Goodbye.
Thank you for Gil unpaid